All right. NCDV says we are live, so looks like we got a quorum. Looks like we got the 6 we were expecting for sure. So
Perfect. So with that, we will get going and I will start our remote meeting script. So as a preliminary matter, this is Ashley Arisman, Chair of the Nantucket Conservation Commission. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Mark Beal,
Yes.
Seth Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Ian Golding,
Aye.
Maureen Phillips, I think you need to unmute.
All right. Aye.
And Joe Topham.
Aye.
Okay. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Jeff Carlson,
here.
Joanne Dodd.
Aye.
Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Looks like we have Art Gasparo,
Here.
Paul Santos, may or may not be here right now, Steve Cohen,
Here.
John McMeeking,
Here.
Roger Michnenowitz. Sorry, I butchered that. Roger, are you here? Roger, can you just respond in the affirmative if you're here? Not sure about that one. Tarja McGrail.
I'm here.
And then Diane O'Neill.
I am here.
Okay. So good evening. This open meeting of the Nantucket Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Nantucket Conservation Commission is convening by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some of the ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or your computer when you are not speaking. And please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair leads the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment as follows. Staff will activate the chat feature on YouTube. Members of the public who have comments or questions can use this feature to communicate with the whole public body. Instructions are on the town's website. The chair and/or staff will do their best to address the questions and comments. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. So I think it worked out really well last time with everybody raising their hand if they needed to comment. I do just want to remind the public that when you sign into the YouTube to comment, please use your real name or state your real name so that we have that for our accurate minutes. And with that, we will begin tonight's Conservation Commission meeting with public comment. And it looks like our public comment is open.
I'd say whenever you're ready, Madam Chair.
Awesome. Okay, so the following items are continued tonight. We have 46 Shimo Pond Road Nominee Trust at 46 Shimo Pond Road. That's continued until May 28th. We have Nantucket Point of View LLC at 9 Lincoln Avenue. That's continued until May 14th. Kim Glowacki at 46 Easton Street is continued until May 14th. And then in requests for determination, the Karen Alper Revocable Trust of 2005 at 1 Wamisquid Place and 49 Meadowview Drive have also continued until May 14th. And with that, we will start our public hearing with notices of intent. Chuck Rowe Nominee Trust at 25 Quays Road, represented by Art Gasparo.
Thank you. This is the third public hearing for the application that you're familiar with to install a new bulkhead in front of a timber failing licensed bulkhead. The first hearing was a general presentation. There were some questions. The second hearing, we provided a revised plan, which had some additional details. And then based on the comments at the second hearing, we've provided yet another revised plan, which is on the screen before you right now. And after discussions with the owners and hearing the concerns of the commission with respect to the ability to traverse the beach or the frontage of the property along the harbor, what they've agreed to is to grant a 5-foot wide pedestrian easement that would go along the top of the bulkhead and connect from the Quays Road layout on the east to the land bank property on the west. Ideally, the family would hope that this would essentially be used at times of high tide when folks couldn't otherwise use the beach. We still have included the extension that's been in the application since the beginning, which we feel is critical to protecting the integrity of the structure. And by proposing, as we went through the bit of an alternatives analysis at the last hearing, that it's going to be the method to do so with the least impact to the resource areas. So really the only change from the last hearing is what's shown in green, and that's the proposed 5-foot wide pedestrian easement. Steve Cohen, attorney, is also representing the owners and is on the call as well. Should you have any questions for either of us? Thank you.
Thank you, Art. So any questions or comments from commissioners? Ian?
Yes. Hello, Art. Hello, Steve. Under 310 CR 9.35, the Conservation Law Foundation says that you have the right to walk, pass freely, fish and fowl on tidelands unless the property's waterways license limits this activity or the state restricts access for public health and safety. So I would say that in fact, the landowner was obliged to provide access, which you may consider to be cavilling on the issue. But it also says that you should provide a clearly legible sign under the same provision. But more importantly, if you would turn to page 110 of the application, or I guess that's my iPad. But in the photocopy of the original license number 933, it says on the second page, which is page 110 of 702 on my iPad, it says that commencing at the licensee's easterly property line, said bulkhead may extend in a northwesterly direction, a distance of approximately 10 feet, thence turn in a westerly direction along said mean high water for a distance of approximately 120 feet. And then on the next page, part of the license granting, nothing in this license shall be construed as authorizing encroachment on or over property not owned or controlled by the licensee, except with the consent of the owner or owners thereof. So the reason why I'm bringing this up for both Art, Steve, and my fellow commissioners is that we've discussed in increasingly greater depth of what we face on the island going forward with sea level rise. And I feel that I could argue and could ask for an opinion from town council whether or not the Chapter 91 license granted was no longer valid because this original license was granted on the assessment, on the condition that the bulkhead follow the high tide line. And it's now the high tide line is clearly much further back within the property, which also then brings me onto the subject of moving the property back. And this is where Joe and I disagreed because Joe felt there wasn't enough room. So, and so these, I think, are issues that need to be considered. And I'm not sure where to take this because I'm reluctant to force the issue on this particular property under these circumstances where there are other properties on the road that also are part of the peninsular effect. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief in my comments because a lot of what I've said has already been said in previous meetings, but I would just like to reiterate my point that I think we have not done the necessary analysis of alternatives that are more environmentally friendly than bulkheads, one of which Ian mentioned is potentially moving the property back. There's also possibilities of removing the bulkhead and creating a living shoreline. There's possibilities of keeping the bulkhead, but incorporating plantings and or organic features to create a hybrid structure. All these possibilities, the outlines for them are in the packet I provided them in the past. And I think that we need to start somewhere on this type of analysis. In our regulations, it says we are required to have environmentally more friendly analyses come to the commission before bulkheads can be rebuilt. And I think we need to take that seriously. I'm willing to start the process now with this property. And if the commission doesn't agree, I'm going to be saying the same exact thing next time we have a bulkhead come in for being rebuilt or repaired. But I'm not going to stop voicing this opinion until we start to follow our regulations on that. I also think that I understand the proposed need for the extended area along the easterly side of the property, but I think that constitutes a new structure that is not currently licensed and is not currently permitted. So I think this is beyond a bulkhead repair. It's partially repair, but partially new construction. And I think we need to take that seriously. So I'll just say again, I'm opposed to this project. And I'm going to continue to try to push for more environmentally friendly alternatives in the future.
Thank you, Seth. Steve, you had your hand up at one point. Do you still have a comment?
I was going to respond to some things that Ian had said, but I can wait till after the commissioners go.
Okay. Joe?
So I'm going to stick to my understanding is that they can rebuild this bulkhead. I do understand that Seth has a really great idea of doing, geotubes and some natural rebuilding of that area, but I just don't see that that's possible in this site. I think there's other areas on the island that we could definitely look at this very seriously, but I just don't see that this is a possibility at this specific site. So I'm in favor of them rebuilding and doing what they did. I think that we only asked for them to go back and provide a walkway, and they've done that, and they've shown how it's going to be delineated. So I think that Art has done this due diligence and is coming back and now getting more pushback than I think he expected for this application. So I'm in favor of what is in front of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Joe. I see where you're coming from. I just want to, if I may, read the part of our regulations that I'm referencing. It says bulkheads may be rebuilt only if the commission determines that there is no environmentally better way to control an erosion problem, including in appropriate cases, the moving of the threatened building. So we have our own opinions about whether that's feasible at the site, but that alternatives analysis in my mind hasn't taken place. And if commissioners think that there's no environmentally friendlier way in this site, then I'll support what the commission says. I just think we need to take that seriously in the future.
Thank you, Seth. I know because I have previously allowed some bulkheads to be rebuilt, I'm a little bit on the fence about this one. I am concerned about the extension of the bulkhead and being able to confidently permit that because I think that is a location where certainly we could be more environmentally friendly. Any other, Mark?
Would there be any merit in, with this policy already on our books, and putting all the applicants on notice that we will ask for an alternative plan before they submit their plan to rebuild the bulkhead. I think it's fair to applicants to say, we're going to look seriously at enforcing what we have on the books as a established regulation, and we will now begin to enforce it, or I guess enforce it. I didn't know if we've done that before. This will be new ground for us, and I just didn't know if there'd be merit in putting applicants on notice.
I mean, I guess Jeff can speak to this, but we usually require alternatives analysis with projects.
But have we here?
Jeff, do you think that's been a fair application, I guess, of that?
Yeah, we've definitely requested alternatives analysis before for similar projects to look at whether it's different materials or different locations or different things that are there. I mean, obviously it changes a little bit site by site for what that analysis looks like and what options are available. I think certainly if the commission wants to, flesh that out a little bit further, I think that's certainly within the performance standard and have the ability to do. But I tend to agree that if that's going to be something that starts to get required as a more in-depth alternative analysis that also includes some sort of green or bioengineered structure or alternative structure altogether for what that would look like, I think having some sort of guidance document to put out to applicants would certainly be helpful.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Mark?
Have we in the past asked any applicants to produce a living shoreline?
Jeff?
That's kind of a long answer, but we've, in alternatives analysis, living shorelines and other options have definitely been contemplated before. With any coastal engineering structure, we've had a lot of different, everything from hard structures to hybrid structures to soft structures. It's been a little bit variable, but I think it's also been based upon actual site conditions before for what we're looking at and what options are even available.
Thank you, Jeff. Maureen?
Listening to everything, and this is I think this is a very difficult case for it. My fellow commissioners have all given, I think, very thoughtful and valuable analyses of this. And I was hoping as I was listening that I would find something that makes me more confident of kind of going in one direction or another. I'm thinking now at this point that from the get-go, this was presented to us, I believe, without, I didn't go back to look at the absolute original one because this has been continued a number of times, without real alternatives analysis, that it was, we'll fix the existing thing and we may be adding this addition, but without, even after Seth put in his, that very lucid suggestion about the living shorelines, I think it kind of got off, frankly, kind of on the wrong foot here, that we didn't have that to begin with. And the regulation does state that it's certainly possible for us to require alternatives analysis. I'm not sure if it says we absolutely have to insist on it, but it is certainly within our toolbox. And I may be wrong about that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff. But the looking at this point, again, going back to it, I really feel like I'm feeling stuck because of what the applicant has provided. And while, since I also know this property and I know it's a very difficult situation and not the best one, and Joe's comments I think are very well taken. I do think that we need to insist upon alternatives analysis. And since it's already in the reg, I mean, we can certainly let people know that this is something we want to see, within the package and not start out without it. I think we are within our rights to say, no, we haven't seen that yet. we are allowed to ask for it. And so I would be inclined to ask them to provide a real alternative analysis here, as opposed to just what's been proposed, which is replacing what is rotting and that one addition. So I guess that's where I am. I certainly agree with what Mark said about making it clearer to our community that this is something that's really important to us. But I think going back, I think it's fair for us to ask for this particular applicant. I wish there was another way out of it. I know it's not going to be easy for them, but I really think this is what we need to do for the environment. So that's where I am.
Thank you, Maureen. Seth?
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to go on record and want to say I don't think the applicant is at fault here. We have our regulations and there's also a permitting history. And I understand that there's been a permitting history of repairing bulkheads. I think that independent of the permitting history, it's time to take this regulation seriously and identify these alternatives. So I completely understand where the application was coming from. I think it was originally submitted in November, but I still would like to see that analysis done.
Thank you, Seth. Art, I think you had your hand up, and then Steve.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate everybody's comments. If I could just go through and start with Mr. Golden's comments with respect to the license and then work through the list the best I can. And then I'm sure Stephen may have want to also fill it in. In terms of the requirement to pass and repass, that's with respect to the intertidal zone, which is essentially on the face of the bulkhead. So I do think that it is a major give of the property owners to voluntarily grant an easement in an area that's outside of the intertidal zone to allow that passage. And then if I could go to page 113 of the packet, which is just a couple of pages in the license after the page referenced by Mr. Golding, that's the actual plan. And on that plan, mean high water is specifically shown and labeled. My reading of the license granted at that time, as it refers to mean high water, is in reference to the plan included with the license. So that is, the permitted structure is described in the location on the plan where mean high water is shown. And this may seem like semantics, but I think it's very important that the license location is where the bulkhead exists on the ground and where mean high water is shown on that plan. I don't think it's in reference to an ambulatory line of mean high water that has shifted over time. So I think that if you look on the plan and where it's shown, that's what's referenced. I do think that there are the two issues, as we've discussed in the previous hearings, as related to the repair and replacement versus the extension. The extension is proposed solely for the purpose of maintaining the stability of the license structure. In other words, we didn't extend, much further down the property line other than what would be needed, so that we're not getting water that comes around the end of that structure. And this is not at all dissimilar to what's recently been approved for the land bank at Easy Street, with the extension of the bulkhead that goes along that property line, which protects the integrity of the structure that's being essentially replaced. This is a very, very similar application, and that isn't necessarily long in the past permitting history. So I think that the replacement of the bulkhead or the installation of the new steel in front of what's existing is entirely justified by the license and allowed, and that the extension is part of the bigger discussion. And in hearing the concerns of the commission, a big part of the justification for that is the voluntary granting of the easement in an area that is outside of the intertidal zone. Further, I would like to address the comments regarding the alternatives analysis and just bring your attention to page 99 of the packet, which is the second letter that I provided to the commission following the first hearing. And I did do an alternatives analysis. It could be more detailed if needed. I felt that in this case, what we hit on was fairly self-explanatory and straightforward. But again, hearing the discussion of the commission, if more information is needed for you to present to you how I came to the determination of the preferred alternative as what's being proposed, then that's certainly something that we could consider. I specifically stated that the alternative of installing the exact configuration was one of the alternatives that was considered, and in doing so, the removal of that timber would essentially, as we see it, have a greater impact on the resource areas. And then if we were to we also considered stone gabions and fiber rolls, which I address as part of the alternatives analysis on the following page. And again, they would require much more excavation and a greater level of disturbance of the resource areas. The reason that we've selected the alternative of the steel is twofold. One, that it maintains a structure that is, especially for the length of what's been licensed, essentially what has been properly permitted by the commission, has a license that requires the maintenance of that structure, and then is doing so in a manner with the least adverse impact to the interest protected by the commission. So I do feel that the alternatives analysis, it's not that we didn't consider alternatives in terms of laying out, a multi-page point by point and looking at whether and why things such as complete removal of a licensed structure and some sort of living shoreline or grading back. Again, the alternatives there is that it would require a much greater disturbance of the property, and you do have pre-78 structures that if we had to slope that back would become, put into a greater situation of danger, and they are afforded the protection under the regs and the bylaw as pre-78 structures. So we have done, the alternatives analysis. We have addressed it in the correspondence, and we did feel that the granting of the easements, just in summary, certainly, which we don't think would have had to have been done, is an overall net benefit to the protection of the resource areas, as well as improvement in terms of the ability for the public to, at high tides, be able to traverse a property that they currently can't. And with that, I would defer back to the chair. Mr. Cohen, you might have any additional comments.
Thank you, Art. Steve, did you want to comment or follow up?
Sure, just very briefly, I think Art hit the right points on the Chapter 91 license in terms of its existing grant of rights to the intertidal zone to the public, and in terms of the existing location being as defined on the plan, as opposed to as, the dynamic medium, high tide line. And also the alternatives, and not only that the alternatives analysis was submitted here, but I think it's really important to look at the situation on the ground, both the particularities of this lot, which is small and has a mostly eroded beach in front of it now, but but also the fact that there's 1,000 feet of seawall to the west. So ripping out what's there would require, would be not only impactful, but replacing it with something that would be substantially wider and dug into the existing bluff would not be beneficial, but would also be, create a system where you're having that combined with the seawall at the landbank property would probably create more problems for the erosion at that point by trying to have similar systems. And since there's that same characteristics of narrow beaches and seawalls for 1,000 feet in that area, I think that Art has covered the alternatives analysis and has also proposed something that is the most compliant with the Wetlands Protection Act and the most beneficial for the environmental resources here. So I do appreciate that Seth would like to see the commission go further and I'm not aware of any living coastlines that have been implemented, and I think they're a great idea in a place where they make sense. I'm just not sure this small lot next to these seawalls is the right place to start it. And that's not to say that there's no place that's right to start it. I think there is, but this I don't know that it pencils out on this location. And I do think that my clients would not be legally under the obligation to provide access across the easement that's being offered in terms of when there's no public access available in the intertidal zone, and that easement is a big public benefit. I think the biggest problem with erosion is that it can eliminate some of that public access, and by reintroducing the public access that way, which would be perpetual, that's a big benefit to the public. So I think that we've proposed something that complies with the standards, that meets the environmental benefits that are being sought, and that provides greater public access than currently exists. And in fact, outside of the easements at the Scotts Bluff, I don't know that any other projects have ever provided similar easements. So, this I think is a step in the right direction, given the situation that's on the ground and the improvements that are going to happen. So we would ask you to consider approving as proposed, although certainly, if the commission has suggestions, we're open to considering, anything that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I know one thing that I think what Art was saying got me thinking about, like when we're talking about one of these maybe living options causing more damage to the resource area, I think it's important that we try and nail down like an impact to the resource area that might happen now, but 3 years from now, the resource area will be much better off for it, versus doing something because it might not disturb the resource area as much, but the resource area is permanently damaged or altered as a result of it. Because these resource areas do rebound if you give them, the proper care. And I know that I read through Seth's documents, and I think that it is important to look at the long-term resource area health. And I think that long-term, the living shoreline options certainly would be better for the resource area. But that's just my thought. Any other thoughts from commissioners? Ian?
So Art, I like your choice of shirt, as I think I'm wearing an identical one. And Steve, I like your background. I wish I was there. So, but I would say because of the peninsular effect, and in fact, that it is no. I look at the map you were talking about, Art, on page 113, and so I see where the high tide line skirts the bulkhead and then goes, and then the bulkhead is drawn behind it in the original. But right now, there is no high tide line. There is no beach exposed at high tide. At high tide, that's entirely cut off. And so from my point of view, trying to protect the interests that we're charged with protecting, I, like Maureen, feel conflicted. I happen to disagree with Steve because I think that the readings of the regulation that I summarized means that, in fact, in this situation, they would have to grant the easement. But somehow, and also I feel there hasn't been an alternative analysis about actually moving the house back. I take Steve's point about that it's part of 1,000 foot, what has become a 1,000 foot peninsula, protected peninsula. And in the long term, that is not, it's detrimental to what we're charged with protecting. And, you know, God knows what it's going to look like 20 or 30 years down the road. I don't know. So it's absolutely clear when you look at the aerials, how much that has changed since the 70s. So I think I'm going to be agreeing with Seth and Maureen that I would like to see an alternative analysis. And Joe, I defer to you and your ancestors.
So Joe.
So I just have a question where, like, what is it, 21 and 27 Easton Street. Several years ago, we allowed them to rebuild the retaining wall in front of that with steel bulkhead. And then along Easton Street, we allowed that. So I'm kind of hearing what you guys are saying, but I also hear what Steve is saying. We have 1,000 feet. So does that mean the next time someone in town, Steamship Authority, the docks, any Easton Street, all those things, we should all take them out and we should say, you got to do some alternative analysis. You've got to do something that's natural. I just feel like the bylaw says they can maintain this. And I think there has to be some ways within the town and with some certain areas, you have to say, this is going to cause more damage to remove this. And it's going to accelerate more erosion and come deeper into the island. So there has to be somewhere that's got to cut this off. And this project is coming up at 21 and 27. I feel like that just came up a couple of years ago. We should have held them to the same standard. The land bank is coming up for an amendment. Should we say that you have to remove this? I mean, they want to do a park. Is that park beneficial, or should we be doing something better for, you know, the erosion that's coming in? I'm having a hard time. I agree with what Seth's saying. I think there are certain sites on Nantucket that the information that he gave us, which I really enjoyed. I think it's great. It's thinking outside the box, or actually it's forward thinking. I think that's great, but I think we have to be at some point, yes, the erosion is coming and sea levels are rising. These are all things we have to count, but there's got to be some point where you just say that doesn't work in the site. And I think that that's the case. I think, you know, art has shown us a very small window, but like Steve is saying, to 1,000 feet, we have a problem. And the town is maintaining the lot to the east, and they're providing sand, and, you know, they're trying to mitigate that erosion there, and that's providing sediment. You know, I would love to have these people to say, like, listen, put in 20 feet of sand and let's give it into the littoral system, but that's not something we can do. I think that they've created a public access or pathway so they can get by the property. And I think that that's what we're looking for. I just remember having a hard time, and I agree with, and I hear Seth and Ian's point and Maureen's, but I just think that we have to kind of say, this is not the site for that instance. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Steve?
I think, you know, I'm not sure we have new information to provide, but I think that the commission raises good points as general propositions. And if it's prudent for the commission to do its due diligence and to have Art write up, you know, why we think some alternatives might not be better, not just for the short term, but as Ashley raised, for the long term, and why in this situation, you know, we don't think these are the right things to do, so that you can say that you know, or looked at it and that in this, you know, particular location, it was the right decision, but that might not be true in a different location. Or maybe we look at it and you say, okay, well, you know, this piece of it actually makes sense or not. You know, I think that's a reasonable ask. And I want the commission to feel that they're making the right decision here, which we think is proposed, but certainly willing to do more if that's what the commission wants to see. We don't want to try and shove this down the commission's throat if you don't feel like we've submitted all that information.
Thank you, Steve. Mark, did you have your hand up? You're muted.
Having Art draw up something in writing to me would not be sufficient. I'd like to see what a actual living shoreline plan would look like on this property. I think it'll be very helpful to the commissioners that are wavering, as am I. So I think an actual plan showing a living shoreline to me would make a lot of sense to see what it looks like and how much land they're going to gain or lose. And we know it's going to disrupt the property on the short term. But to me, I agree with you on that one. Actually, that's almost irrelevant for a short term when you might have a long term gain. So I would like to see a plan to see what would happen if they were to remove it and grade and plant that property.
Thank you, Mark. Art?
Madam Chair, if I might suggest that I'm hearing, you know, we're taking your input, and I don't want to belabor the point or cut anybody short. And there is public comment as well on YouTube, but I would suggest that, you know, we will continue and I will work to develop some additional information for you once you're to that point of your meeting.
Thank you, Art. Ian, and then Seth, I think you had a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I would like in the alternatives to actually show why it is not possible to move the house back. And in answering Joe's concerns, you know, I agree with you, Joe, that this isn't cast in stone. And there's a difference, obviously, between a public and a private use in the sense that at the steamship, I mean, it's clearly not practical. And it's not as though access, and you have to balance off, you know, the public rights as opposed to the public good. And clearly the steamship is for the public good. As an easy street, it's not as though there is sort of, you know, a mile or two of beach that there is along the harbor there that is rudely interrupted by this increasing peninsular effect. You know, whether Steve and I and Art agree or disagree as to whether the easement has to be granted or that it was, that the owners were kind enough to grant it, I'm pleased it was granted. And so thank you both, because I think that's very important for our brief going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to start out by saying that I understand the ideas I've presented are aspirational, and I understand that it's difficult to put these into place in all sites. But that being said, I think that it's prudent to try. And to just respond to what Mr. Cohen said about whether there are existing living shoreline sites on island or not, I also believe that currently there are not, but Nantucket has the ability to become a leader in this arena and set a positive example moving forward for beneficial public-private partnerships that respond to climate change and sea level rise in a meaningful, ecological, resource-based way. So I appreciate the applicant and Art as a representative putting forward the plan. Personally, I'm not going to describe all the alternatives available, but personally, I'd like to see at least discussion of moving the structure, a living shoreline, a hybrid project, which would include a bulkhead and some type of organic installation as well, and as well as possibly analysis of additional materials. So I'll leave it up to the applicant to decide what they think is best, but I think that we need a robust alternatives analysis here. And I just want to end by saying that I understand it's a difficult decision. So I really appreciate us as a commission and the applicants taking the time to make sure we get this right, because it is something that's going to affect the island for decades into the future. If we start the process now and create a positive example of a living shoreline, it's been noted that, you know, we have a large bulkhead to the west of this property, but that bulkhead is going to come up for repair at some point too. It might not be for 20 years, but at some point we can start to tie these projects together to create more and more examples of living shorelines, and ultimately it might be a long permitting history, but ultimately kind of reach the goals that we're looking for. So thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Jeff, should we have at some of this public comment? Yeah, I think it's probably about time.
I was on mute. So sure, I will try to read through them as quickly as I can. We've covered a number of them, but RJ Turcott from the Nantucket Land Council had a couple comments. One, that he feels that the return must be considered separately because it is not grandfathered. It is not an in-kind replacement. He then asked me to read aloud the definition of grandfathering in our bylaw for the commission. So if you guys would like to hear it, we can do that. But number two, being water dependent does not exempt the project from all performance standards. And in his opinion, performance standards that are not being met include coastal beach, number 2 and number 7, and coastal bank, number 1, 3, and 7. And that the applicant needs to justify waivers for this extension of the existing structure. So those were his comments. And then he also commented on behalf of the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy and Deanne Atherton that the Coastal Conservancy is concerned about adverse impacts to the public access to the east caused by increased scouring. According to the Coastal Management Plan, the town should be notified in such situations. And to address that comment really quickly, the town was sent a notice as an abutter to the project. So the town has received notice that this project is going on.
Thank you, Jeff. So are there any last thoughts from the commission?
I just request a continuance to the 14th.
Yes. So you would like to continue until May 14th?
Yes, please.
Okay. So this continues until May 14th. Thank you, guys. So moving on to Lottie Leshley, QPRT, and Jan Leshley, QPRT at 65 Squam Road, represented by Art Gasparo. Maureen?
Excuse me, I need to move because I put myself in a different place this week and the sun's about to get in my eyes. So I can hear, but I just need to go to another spot a minute away. So sorry.
That's okay. And Art, you are free to present.
Thank you. So this is the first public hearing for a project to upgrade a existing septic system located entirely within the buffer zone to an extensive border and vegetated wetland system in Squam. And the site is highly constrained by wetlands. We are proposing to add IA technology and to abandon an existing leach pit and install a new elevated leach bed, which will increase the separation distance horizontally to the wetland resource areas, as well as vertically from the estimated seasonal high groundwater elevation. I did do a soil test and perk test at the site shown on the plan, witnessed by the health department, and the again somewhat unusual in that you often don't see a soil absorption system within 100 feet, never mind within 50 feet of the resource area, though that's where it currently exists. It's an existing leach pit, so it goes down, into the groundwater, and we would be up above that. We would have to put in a new force main, which would run down the existing driveway. We do consider this to be a situation of maximum feasible compliance with the health protection regulations, both Title V and local Nantucket regulations. There are, as I see it, no better alternatives than what's being proposed. And there's no expansion of bedrooms for the system. It's of an equivalent capacity. And I would point out the plan that's on your screen. You can clearly see the significant difference in size for what's being proposed compared to what exists, and much of that is due to change in Title V in terms of sizing, as well as the soil conditions which were encountered when I recently did the witnessed perk test. And there's also wetlands across the street. On the other property, I think we've done the best that we can do here. We are waiting for natural heritage, so we will be requesting a continuance, but I did want to present this. We do have a file number just in case there is any additional information which the commission would like. Thank you.
Thank you, Art. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Looks like no. Jeff, is our public comment open on this one?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And I did try reaching out to Natural Heritage today. I'm just not really sure what's kind of going on, there.
Thank you, Art.
And we've had trouble getting a hold of them as well. So I've had it open for public comments for a couple of minutes, Madam Chair, and no one has commented that they have any. So,
Okay.
and I also say, especially since we're going to have to continue anyways, I'm not overly worried.
Yeah, they'll get another shot. So if there's no questions from commissioners, then Art, you'd like to continue till May 14th?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. So this will continue until May 14th.
Thank you.
And moving down our list to 300 Pulpus Road LLC at 300 Pulpus Road, and this is represented by Jeff Blackwell. Jeff, are you here with us?
I'm pretty sure that's his iPad that's down.
Yeah, he just popped in.
Dropped off.
Hello.
Hi.
I had emailed Paul Santos earlier today thinking that I wouldn't be back from the ferry and might miss my place in the queue, but I did, with the previous hearings, the timing. Paul, if you're out there, thank you for offering to switch times. I hope this is okay, that we go back to the normal course of schedule. So we're at 300 Pulpus Road. This is the Crestman property, and the commission members at the first hearing requested several additional pieces of information, which I've provided. The first of which is a plan that instead of showing the entire 3-acre, 4-acre property, sort of zooms in on the area of proposed work, which is now on the screen, I see. So we've shaded in the areas around the existing structure where we would propose excavation of soils to undertake the waterproofing and insulation of the existing foundation. Also on the screen, up in the parking area to the northwest of the building, I've designated a area where the temporary storage of soils will take place that is outside of the buffer zone. I spoke with the contractor who is going to perform this work, Terry Kelly, and he was able to provide some additional clarity about the way he's going to undertake the project and where the materials will be stored, the soils. Terry also, in response to another member's question, which was, what is the machinery that's going to be required in order to complete the work? He described the use of the smallest mini excavator that he could find. And I did provide an example of a John Deere 17G, which is a mini excavator. I sent some details to give you a sense of the size of that machine. Also, a fair amount of the work can be, especially on a portion of the north and along the west side, Terry Kelly stated that he would undertake that work literally with a shovel, because the way the grade falls off there, the excavation will be very shallow, and he wants to disturb the 2 existing retaining walls along the building as little as possible, and some of the work being performed with shovels, especially on the west side, closest to the wetland, is going to be his preferred method to do that. I also provided photographs taken from all sides of the building to give you a better sense of the way the grade falls from east to west, the east being the barn doors, the west being the closest to the wetland boundary. I think it's, there's also some of the commission members wondered whether it would be better to move the building. And although the proximity to the wetland is non-compliant by today's standards, the building was constructed before 1988, when the 50-foot setback came in. And I think it's pretty clear that the work that would be required to stage the construction to move the building, demolish the exposed portions of the foundation, and then fill in the old foundation hole is much greater by 5 or 6 times at least the work that we're proposing to do now. And I don't feel that that would serve the interests of the protection of the wetland. I think those are the main points of information that were requested at the first meeting.
Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
Any questions from commissioners or comments? So Jeff, I know I have driven by this property almost every day the last 2 months. What is going on out there behind the wetland? Because they keep pulling stuff up and it's sitting on like grapevine and things. Like I think we need a clearer plan of what is going on there currently, because there has been a lot of kind of activity back there. And I also think if we're going to leave the structure in the same location, maybe a little bit of a wetland mitigation area or some sort of trade-off on the property to try and buffer those wetlands a little bit.
I've had more than a couple of communications with Caleb Cressman to impress to him the degree of your concerns. And it was a conversation we had before I even filed the notice of intent. And he is, some of his other undertakings are now frozen because of the coronavirus situation. So he has said that he will clean up the rest of the mess, get the debris pulled out. I know it looks very much less than ideal still, but a good deal of material has already been pulled out, and there's a dumpster at the site which he has brought in to further facilitate the cleanup of the site. I wish I could give you a specific timeline. I think it's the cleanup has taken place sort of on a catch can program of progress. But I have, since the last meeting, I once again conveyed the commission's concerns and strong desire to see the location cleaned up before any work can be undertaken on the maintenance and waterproofing of the foundation. He understands that. In terms of, I know that there's no landscaping or any sort of, well, I guess landscaping covers it, proposed for the area around the building. Basically, the natural growth is going to come up, back up to the building, and there's no access or use around the west side, the wetland side, or the north side. It's just, it's sort of the use of the building, access from the south side, from the driveway along the south side where the doors are, is really the access point. So it is going to revegetate. There's going to be no clearing of the area, and the only disturbance within the 25 is pulling lumber. There's a car in there, and other debris that's accumulated, much of it previous to Caleb's ownership of the property. So I know it doesn't look great, but there's already been some significant amount of cleaning up there. I fully expect the staff to monitor the situation and give the sign off as to when actual work on the foundation can take place.
Okay, thank you, Jeff, because I even think the dumpster is like placed within the 25. Joe? Oh, you're muted.
I want to say the same thing about the dumpster. I've been going out there almost every other day, going by the property, and that dumpster is clearly within the 50, if not touching the 25. And I'm just worried about if, Caleb or the crew is putting materials in there, and let's say he pulls out some invasive species and it's in that dumpster, and then that, we get a rain and then some seedlings go into the adjacent wetland that's right there, and that could be problematic. So I'd like to see that dumpster moved. If we could, that'd be great. Get it out of there. And I just think we need a list of what he's seen within the wetlands and have some plan of how he's going to remove a car. I know it's not his mess, But I do think that we need to know how things are going to get out, how things are going to be replaced, how he's going to repair, what species are going to be replaced in those areas that have been damaged by the vehicle sitting there for so many years, etc. So I just think we need to have a little more information from the owner, if that's my request. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I totally agree with you there. Seth?
Thank you. And thank you, Jeff, for supplying the photographs. I kind of expected this from the plan at the last meeting, but it became evident to me from the photographs that the wetland is almost touching the building. I mean, given a high storm, some of those flag plants are gonna basically be touching the foundation. So I think that having a mitigation plan and a remediation plan is going to be critical moving forward. I think that even with a small excavator, even by hand, there's going to be no way to completely prevent damage to the wetland during the waterproofing process. So I think a remediation plan is a good way to get around it.
You're looking for a detailed step-by-step description of the undertaking of the work? Is that?
Yeah, undertaking of the work, and then post work, what could be done to help revegetate or have a replacement planting in some other part of the property.
Okay.
Thank you, Seth. Maureen, did you have a comment?
Yeah, having gone by there just lately myself, I don't get out that way very much, living all the way over in Nantucket. But I was, looking at it, I was surprised to hear that any cleanup has already been done. I mean, I can't imagine what it must have looked like before. My concern is, and Jeff, it sounds like you share the concern, is that this is while the owner apparently bought it when it was not, this property when it was not in wonderful shape, kind of the if you will, the lack of stewardship during the time that this owner has owned it, makes me all the more concerned that we get really, really detailed information about how this is going to be done. And I totally agree with what Seth said about both, getting the details about the plan of work and the mitigation. And I mean, it really, when you look at the lot, I mean, I assume I was just surprised because it was the first time I had actually physically laid eyes on it. I obviously would be extremely expensive to move this building, but it seems this is, I mean, this is it just seems unusual to me to be wanting to, get all this work done without us seeing, a much better work plan. And frankly, all that stuff, how are they going to move all that junk out of there? And, how everything for the remediation and the mitigation plans. It's pretty appalling, I guess, is what I would say. So I'm share everyone's concern.
Well, I think that the property is an example, and I don't want to make an excuse, but what we're looking at is sort of the real old Nantucket, and it's sort of a topsy-turvy old farm property where the sensibilities of today were not, were certainly not observed, and there were no sensibilities about discarding of materials that were no longer useful. So I mean, I say this with all respect. I think we can talk about mitigation plans and how you're going to pull some boards and debris out of the brush, but effectively, that's exactly what is going to take place. There are going to be people, not machinery used to clean up the site, but people aside from perhaps a wrecker that's going to be required to pull the vehicle straight away east, away from the wetland. I mean, I could try to put down in paper sort of a step by step, but it's basically grabbing the junk and pulling it out of the brush. I mean, I'm not sure how much more I can dress that up with some language, but ultimately, if I had to undertake the work myself, it's you pull the stuff out of the brush, and a lot of it is grapevine and honeysuckle, and it is not a pristine wetland area. So I will write up a plan. I'm not sure how much more I can dress up my previous comments, but I'll put it in writing.
Thank you, Jeff, because I think it would be good to get a statement from the homeowner, because what I'm seeing and assuming is that all this material is buried under the grapevine, and then it's being pulled up and just left on top of the grapevine. So like even boards you would assume they could put right in that dumpster seem to be sitting there, like they're accumulating more stuff instead of getting it out right away. So I just think like really nailing down with Caleb what his process is would be important. Not you just saying, hey, they're just going to remove the boards, but say, Caleb, what is going on out there? Because I think he's kind of been doing his own thing. And it's right on Pulpus Road. And I think a lot of homeowners right now are like doing their own projects. And it's just not a good thing in a wetland area.
Mm-hmm.
Seth?
Sorry, I don't want to belabor this point too much. And I understand what you're saying, Jeff, pulling debris out of it, wetland areas, pulling debris. I just think it's helpful to know a little bit about the site characteristics. Is the debris scattered across the wetland? Is it in a pile already? Can it all be kind of brought through on one path, or there's going to have to be multiple paths that it's being pulled out of? And especially for me, the vehicle is the biggest cause of concern. I mean, the force of dragging that weight through the vegetation is going to cause effects that are irreparable for decades. So I think having a plan to potentially replace plant species that are impacted by that is going to be crucial.
Okay.
Joe?
It goes back to, damage to the wetland as a car comes out, but what happens is there is some rare plant there. I mean, we just don't know. And it sounds really simple. We're just going to take it straight out, but what's in between A and B? Let's find out what is there. And I'm just afraid of, and it does sound very simple, Jeff, and I understand what you're saying, but I think that we just need to view and have some plan to say there is, if you pull it out, the evasive is going to be like scattered all over the place. Is there like what's going to happen? So I think there's a plus and a minus where you could have this invasives, but then there's some rare species in there that we just need to know what is going to be impacted once all of this debris is removed. And like I said before, I applaud Caleb for doing this, but I think we need to know before he can go forward what is truly within that wetland or the entire site. Thank you.
Okay.
Seth and then Ian.
Yeah, sorry, just one more thing about the vehicle. Working for a conservation organization and spending a lot of time in nature on Nantucket, I've seen places where there are tire treads that the last time a car drove on that surface might have been 30, 40, or 50 years ago. So I just think that the weight of that vehicle needs to be addressed. I don't know if there's a way to pick it up rather than dragging it. I'm sure the machinery to do that might cause more damage than just dragging it, but I think it would be good to consider the least impactful alternative to getting the car out of there.
Okay.
Thank you, Seth. Ian? You're muted.
Well, you didn't hear what I said. So I noticed that Deanne has posted that the property has been in the same family's ownership since '78. So Caleb wasn't even born then. In the early '70s, there used to be some very good parties there. And the owners then were extremely casual in their approach to life and wetlands. So I take Jeff's point. And so I think it's a good idea, as other commissioners have, want a blueprint and wanted to find out what's there, but I don't think Caleb has the whole onus of what is there by any means.
Thank you, Ian. If there are no other comments from commissioners, we'll open it up and take some of this public comment.
So Ian stole Deanne's thunder. He already used it. She had just commented that the property had been in the same family since 1978 or before. That's all we've had for this one.
Okay. Well, Jeff, it looks like you have a lot to consider. Would you like to request a continuance?
Yes, I think I'm gonna need a month for this one.
Okay, so that is May 28th.
Okay. Yes, please.
Okay, so we will continue this until May 28th.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Looks like you're up again. So Timothy and Elizabeth Quinn list at 88 Quinnet Road, and this is represented by Jeff Blackwell.
Yes, there's been a new plan submitted as a result of the discussion at the first public hearing a couple of weeks ago. And the owners were consulted and they agreed to move the structure, and the structure, when completed, will comply with the 50-foot wetland setback. You can see that from the 50-foot wetland line, the structure is now clear. All portions of it are clear, whereas some small portions of the existing structure do intrude into the 50-foot setback. So this plan is intended to address the concerns of the commission members from 2 weeks ago.
Thank you, Jeff. Joe?
Jeff, are we going to get a new well, or what's happening to that well?
Yeah, we're gonna have to apply for a new well, and that
Okay.
is outside the buffer zone. So as soon as the health department offices are open for permitting, we'll be submitting a new well permit application.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or thoughts from commissioners? I appreciate you moving the house back out of the buffer, out of the 50-foot anyway. So if there are no questions from commissioners, we will see what the public has to say, if there's any public comment on this one.
I don't believe we had any public comment on this one last time either, Madam Chair. And my spelling is bad, so I apologize there.
That's all right. And when I look, I know we are probably the majority of the viewers at this point. Okay. So do we have everything, Jeff, that we need to close this?
Yes, we do, Madam Chair.
Okay. Jeff Blackwell, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Okay. So is there a motion to close?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I think Joe got the second on that one.
I think so. You beat me.
So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you,
You're
Jeff.
welcome.
Okay, so that brings us to the town of Nantucket at 34 Washington Street, represented by Tarja McGrail. Tarja, I don't know that your audio is working.
Building that's up on a pile foundation. Also, we discussed the shelter that is proposed out there for a trailer. Since the last hearing, I was able to get some more information that's been provided to you in the form of a letter from Stephen Kelleher's office. And that letter includes a little bit more description about how the design process has occurred to date and some of the design criteria that they're trying to accomplish with the building design that's before you as far as floor plans and building layout. So I'm not sure if maybe you have questions based on his letter that I could answer, or if you have any other site questions we could go through.
Okay. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Seth, I think, got first, and then Ian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to respond to the carport or the shelter for the trailer. And I appreciate the letter from the architect. I just want to bring attention, it's a little bit of a separate issue here, but I just want to bring attention to Nantucket's tiny house regulations, in that we allow shingled, basically trailers on movable platforms. And I'm not going to speak for the HDC. I have really no knowledge of their committee hearings, but I'm wondering why cedar shingled, HDC compliant movable trailer isn't a possibility, rather than having a fixed structure with a movable trailer inside of it.
Thank you, Seth. Tarja, do you want to take that one?
I can't really give an affirmative as to whether or not that would be a direction that would work for the town at this point. It could be something that could be discussed further between the architect and the project team. I know that it's very valuable to them that, you know, the structure, we have a storage shelter outside or some kind of place to lock up materials, and you saw that it's, you know, pumps, hoses, it's all equipment for the pier area and use on this site. So I know that it's important for them to have a trailer that they can move on and off the site. So if looking into making the trailer similar to a tiny house, that's something I would have to take up with the architect in the town.
Thank you. Ian?
Well, Tarja, thank you for the for both the letter and the plans, the floor plans. My objections remain the same. I see absolutely no reason that a trailer couldn't be kept on the other side of the road. A number of town committees from the NSAB and a number of nonprofits like the Land Bank, because of the stay at place, haven't been able to have board meetings. I would ask the applicant to continue this until there can be public input in person. And I prefer to see the existing footprint used for a new building, and also how it's in the floodplain and how come it's not up on piers at this particular point. It's obviously, I assume if the town is putting money into it, then it should last for 40 or 50 years when you're going to be able to canoe down there on a regular basis. So there are just so many things that worry me about this application that, and I've said my piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. I know that I have now gone past this site 2 or 3 times since our last meeting, and I am increasingly concerned with the size of the structure. And I actually today, I remember our last conversation about Washington Street being dangerous to cross. We might be at the point where we need to slow down the traffic on Washington Street to actually access the water views of the harbor. And I think that people who are using those showers and the public bathroom aspect could walk across the street. Like, it's not that big of an ask in my view. And I think that the town could get better crosswalks, better signage. It's almost standstill traffic on that street anyway during the summer, to try and make the waterfront structure a little bit easier to swallow. Because I think that it's too large for that location.
I do see that it looks like Patrick Quinlan from Stephen Kelleher Architects was able to join us. So I'm not sure if I could introduce him. He's been involved with a lot of the development of the programming for the building that is before you today. And maybe Patrick, you could just kind of walk through the reasons why it's important to have the facilities as they're proposed on that side of the street, and also the offices that are in that building that are part of the water dependent use of the building as it's positioned in close proximity to the pier.
Well, it is the harbor master building, so they need to be close to the water just to observe what's going on, get out to their vessels, and do the various things that they do. The building offers public bathroom facilities for all the users of the pier and the general public. The building, yes, larger than it used to be, but we've had in accessibility, modern building codes, the fact that you need an elevator, the fact that we're providing about 60 feet of ramp to raise the building up a little bit. We're not entirely out of floodplain or out of the velocity zone, but we're partially up. If we raised ourselves up completely, the building would be about 6 feet higher than what is proposed. And given the 30-foot height limitation, it's rather difficult to get any kind of building when in there when you're starting at 13 feet above grade for the bottom of the structure. You know, basically you would be looking at a one-story building instead of a two-story building, and that would not satisfy their needs at all. The first floor is primarily public spaces, washrooms, got men's room, women's room, and a public information area for the harbor master's building, for the harbor master herself. On the second floor, we have space for lifeguards, a meeting room, and a space for the harbor master. That's pretty much it. It's actually a fairly small building when you look at it. But yes, the footprint is a little bit larger, but we had to get people basically 5 feet above what the existing grade is in order to get up to the floor level, just to be partially out of the floodplain or the velocity zone. We do have a variance from the building code that was applied for and received, I believe it was in 2015. We've been working on this since 2013. The reason for the storage shelter is so that, one, we have a place to store something, such as pumps, firefighting equipment, the various equipment that the harbor master needs. The reason for providing, in effect, a carport for a trailer is, one, to reduce the expense to the town. The building a permanent garage where the top of it is just at the top of the flood elevation wouldn't really work. It would cost, I don't know, in the range of $700,000 to build something that would withstand velocity zone floods. What we chose to do was have the town purchase a trailer and build a carport to hide or mask the trailer. The intent is, if there's a storm coming, we pull the trailer out, the carport is wide open, the bottom of the walls is a foot above grade, the water can come and go and the waves can splash and nothing will happen to anything. When the storm is over with, the trailer gets moved back onto site and all the harbor master's equipment is back on site. And it probably saves in the range of $500,000 to the town. Because I know you're not supposed to pay attention to cost, but it is the town. It's not a commercial building, if you will.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, normally I'm all for town projects, but this does seem a little excessive. And with a town property across the street, to maybe put the citizen bathrooms or the boat user bathrooms, like, I think we could get a little more creative here and preserve the water view that so many organizations are trying to preserve at this point, is my feeling. Seth, you had a comment?
Thank you, Patrick. I guess I'm just a little confused about the use of the equipment in the trailer. I mean, it's going to be offsite during a storm, but we're talking about critical safety equipment like pumps and firefighting equipment that might need to be used by the harbor master during that storm. So I'm a little bit worried about that. I think that in some ways, if it's critical equipment, it needs to be stored somewhere in the building. And if it's not critical equipment, then it can be stored off-site. So I just don't see any reason for the trailer or the carport personally to be on-site. I understand that they have equipment they need to store, but I think if it's not critical, it can be elsewhere. And if it is critical, it needs to be inside.
Okay, well, that may be. I'll have to discuss that obviously with the client. Basically, if the floodwaters are coming up to elevation 11 and the velocity zone waves, no one's going to be using the building. No one will be there at all, because it would be too much of a risk of life for the individuals in the building. It just nuts. So that's the reason for pulling it off site temporarily. I mean, granted, it's high tide is the worst of the situation. It's going to drop down. The flood elevation is going to drop down at least 6 feet at low tide. The trailer can come and go, but to have it there when all the equipment is basically going to be inaccessible anyway, doesn't make any sense to me.
Joe, and then Ian had a comment.
So I agree with what Seth's saying. And I think that trailer shed, whatever you want to call it, I think that could go across the street. I think it could take a parking spot if you want to put up the structure, and that way you could even lock it. And then if the storm comes up, it's all locked up. You don't have to worry about it at nighttime. It's secure. And I think that would be a great location. I'd also like to see the HCC get a pound of flesh of this building. And I know that sometimes you want to come see us first, but I would really like to see the HCC, really give their critique and comments of this, because I think it's going to drastically change. You know, I could see the transoms on the second floor coming down. I could just see a lot of things of the vernacular of this, you know, structure being changed quite dramatically. And then I think it may come back and it may be more palatable for us to see as a smaller building or a shallower building, you know, not quite as tall and as massive. And I really think that that's an important piece that we should be kind of asking the applicant to go back and go get their sign of approval. But I think that to move the bathrooms across the street, I think that would be really problematic as far as the use for the town. And I understand what you're saying, Ashley, but I think that that would, you know, without taking down the old building department across the street and rebuilding that, I mean, that's an option, but that's really for the town to decide as far as that goes. But I just would like to see those two comments. One, the cart barn garage across the street, and then the HTC to, you know, to really vet this out and, you know, get their comments and then come back to us with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And then Ian?
I absolutely second what Joe said and Seth. And in fact, I think we're all on the same page. I look at the footprint and I think, well, you know, maybe just have, I'd like to see an alternative where within the existing footprint, the new drawings maybe showed just toilets downstairs and then the harbor master's office up on the second floor, which in fact it basically is now anyway. And, you know, I question the meeting room, and I just would rather see an effort to try and take everything we're talking about into account. So.
Thank you, Ian. And then Mark, you had a comment or question?
Yes.
So have at it.
For me, I thought I was Ian who said, no, I just want, without delaying things, I echo all the comments. It's too big a building. The trailer storage building could go across the street. Scale it down, please. I just thought we don't need a big building there. Well, we're land bank's trying so hard to have that area open up, and now we're gonna just destroy that goal. So I echo all previous comments.
Thank you, Mark. Any other thoughts from commissioners? Maureen?
Yeah, I just want to be on record that I agree with my fellow commissioners, especially with regard to how that would change the whole viewscape and land, you know, that whole area of Washington Street would be changed with this very large structure going in. And it's hard to see that there aren't alternatives to that. Thank you. And I really think Joe's idea about getting the HDC input before we have to look at, before we look at it, I think makes a great deal of sense as well.
Thank you, Maureen. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? And if not, we can get to public comment. So it looks, Jeff?
I was just going to start a public comment, if that's all right.
Perfect. Yep.
So again, RJ Turcott for the Nantucket Land Council. It said Nantucket Land Council is concerned with the building size and its impact on wetland scenic views, while also recognizing its public benefit. And then he asked, wetland scenic views are a protected interest, but not a performance standard. Jeff, what ability does the commission have to protect these views? I'll answer that in a second. And then he put, lastly, have alternatives been analyzed for harbor master and staff offices elsewhere to help reduce the size of the structure, or alternate locations for bathrooms and shower facilities? So to answer the one question, if I may, Madam Chair, on your ability to protect that. So the interests are obviously kind of the parent, are obviously the parent regulation that drives the performance standards. So obviously you're always striving to protect the interests, and there's kind of a catch-all performance standard that the commission can impose conditions on a project necessary to protect the interests as listed in the regulations. So you guys do have the ability to condition something or review something related to wetland scenic views, as long as it's clear that that condition is to help mitigate or prevent impacts to those scenic views.
Thank you, Jeff. Was that our only public comment?
Yes.
Okay. Tarja?
So I'm hearing that probably the best course is a request for continuance, and we can go back and speak to our client, and also perhaps go to HDC before we come back before the commission again.
Okay. You have to continue to a date certain. So do you want to say a month from now?
I think it's going to be at least a month. Let's start with a month, and I can always send in a letter to request further continuation to a new date.
Okay, so this will continue until May 28th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we are moving on to 11 Meadow Lane LLC at 11 Meadow Lane, and this is represented by Paul Santos.
Hello.
Hello.
Good evening, everyone. Paul Santos on behalf of the property owner and applicant, 11 Meadow Lane LLC. This is a piece of property that had been previously developed with a single-family residential home that has since been removed. And the parcel is now 2 separate residential lots. The property to the east came before the commission approximately a year ago and is currently being developed with a single-family home, a guest house, and a pool. We are before you tonight for what is now vacant lot, which is 11 Meadow Lane, in which we are working within the buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland that's associated with a drainage ditch that runs in an east-west direction and parallel to Meadow Lane. The project itself the work occurs within the outside of the 50-foot no build and within the 100-foot buffer zone. And the application before you is for a proposed guest house and pool with associated utility installation, grading, and landscaping within the buffer zone to the bordering vegetated wetland that I had just discussed. The application itself does not require any waivers in such a way that with the pool is elevated at the high point on the lot, does not require a waiver from the 2-foot groundwater separation. The guest house component, when that is fully designed, will also meet the 2-foot groundwater separation as I believe they do not plan to put a full basement within that component of the project. The majority of the lot, the dwelling itself, driveway, and so forth, and even structure associated with the pool is all outside the 100-foot buffer zone. The area is not in a floodplain, and it is not within jurisdiction of NHESP. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. The plan that you see before you depicts both the property to the east, which is being developed, and we are the property to the west of that on the plan that you see in front of you. So happy to answer any questions that you may have with regard to the application. This is the first time we've been before you with this particular application.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Jeff. I was just wondering if there had been a landscaping plan put into place. I'm just wanting to make sure that any associated landscaping with the pool between the 50 and 100-foot buffer, is using native plants.
Paul, do you have any information about the landscaping?
There is a site plan that is developed, and that's part of the package. But I know this there, and that was prepared by Atlantic Landscape, but that plan does not set forth any specific plantings within that area. The series of itself is the pool is elevated with a retaining wall stairway down. And I don't believe there's any large plantings other than in the pool area, which are planned for basically small shrubbery around the pool area. The property to the east, I know as part of the order of conditions for that property, there was discussion about no work actually taking place between even the 25 and 50. And that, I believe, is a condition of the property to the east. So all the work would occur, and to this scenario also is all proposed to occur outside of the 50 and nothing between the 25 and the 50.
Thank you, Paul. Joe?
Paul, the note is kind of tough to read. It says 2-foot retaining wall. Is that width or height or? Do you know?
That's the height, I believe, Joe. That's because that grade, the grade along the backside of that property is around 14. We're raising the pool up to about elevation 17.
Okay.
And then there's a stairway. There's about a 2-foot drop off. There's probably a 2 or 3 foot drop off in some cases along the backside of that wall.
And that wall doesn't return. It just kind of dies at either lot line. Seems a little
At
strange.
either lot line, because the property to the east has already been elevated as part of the work that's going on there. And the same thing, the grade on the other side will tie in on the west side also.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul. Joe, do you have any, like a follow-up, or is that it?
No, it's it for now. I'm thinking.
Any other comments or thoughts from commissioners? Ian? You're muted again.
Sorry, commissioners. So the contour lines are after the fill. Paul?
I'm sorry, Ian?
The contour lines on the plan are after it's been filled?
No, the contour lines there are, that's existing, Ian.
Okay,
There are spot elevations on the plan that represent what the elevation is of the proposed pool. So the high point of the lot right now is approximately at 16. It's a plateau kind of in the center of the lot. And the pool area, there's an elevation of 17.25, I believe, on the plan. And that would be the area of the pool. That would be elevated. Then you'd be stepping down to match the existing grade on the low side of the retaining wall. So there'd be a stairway down in which, where that stairway is shown, you're dropping down to an existing grade of around 14.
thank you.
So the wall itself is elevating simply the pool area, and then you're walking down to an existing grade on the low side.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Paul. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? If not, I guess we can open it up to public comment.
So I asked for public comment at the start of this, and we haven't received any yet, so
Just
I'm
sitting
assuming
there.
it was-
Okay, so commissioners, do we have questions we would like answered, or are we satisfied with this one?
What's that?
We're good. Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes, we do.
Paul, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion?
Motion to close.
Is there a second?
Second.
Maureen got the second. All right, by roll vote, Beal? Oh, you're muted.
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, next. So we're moving on to Hulbert Act 2 LLC at 4 Hulbert Avenue, and this is represented by Paul Santos.
Okay, thank you again, Paul Santos from Nantucket Surveyors on behalf of the property owner and applicant, Act 2 LLC. This is a notice of intent for the raising and elevation, and by that I mean elevating, I guess, not raising, but raising this particular property to become compliant with the current flood zone standards. The property itself is better known as the Blue Shutters, existing parcel that was formerly owned by the Cross family. at the turnaround on Hulbert Avenue. Recently, 2 Hulbert Avenue has been before you for a new construction, and 6 Hulbert Ave, I believe, or 8 Hulbert Ave has been before you with the same scenario to raise the elevation of the existing structure. The site itself is located completely within land subject to coastal storm flowage. And also, this is a little bit of a unique subject parcel down in Brant Point, as there's also a bordering vegetated wetland along one side of the property. So the work itself entails no expansion of the existing structure. And in fact, in one case where we're taking off a small wart that exists along the backside of the building, is to take the structure, elevate it to conform to the flood zone standards for this particular area, which raises the building approximately about 5 feet. Flood zone in this area is elevation 9. Per the 9th edition of the code, our minimum elevation of the structure itself would be +1 foot. So that would put our top of foundation at 10, and it'd put our floor elevation, top of foundation at 9, and our floor elevation just above 10. In doing so, we would have to raise the elevation of the structure and create some stairways into the property. We are looking to reduce the size of the rear decking in the back area, and that would be a structural change to the decking itself. But as far as the structure goes, simply elevating the structure and increasing the stairway. Subject is not within the land jurisdictional to NHESP, and we do have our DEP file number. And I apologize if that was a phone call coming into me here.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any questions from commissioners? Seth.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Paul. I just see on the plan, if I'm reading it right, that there's proposed American hornbeam trees. And I know I made a point last week to say that we need a alternate species. So if we could just switch out that tree species, it would be great.
Yeah, Seth, actually, I apologize because that base file was from the original project. Those trees have been switched out. And I didn't even notice they were on this plan because that's actually a separate piece of property.
Thank you.
But I will amend this plan before it goes into the packet to show what I hope you're going to prove later on in this meeting, which is a simple tree on that property.
Jeff, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, the tree specifically is talked about in the minor mod that's later for 2 Hulbert Ave, where they've proposed. I won't tell you what it is. I'll let it build suspense, but it is a different tree than hornbeam.
Thank you, Jeff. Maureen.
I appreciate the explanation, Paul, because I kept looking, I saw the word hornbeam just leapt out at me with neon lights. And I'm going, wait, is this 2 or 4, Hulbert? What are we looking at here? So, but seriously, I appreciate you being sensitive to that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Jeff, what's our public looking like with this one? Oh, we have a quiet public today. All right, so if there are no comments from the public and no other comments from commissioners, Jeff, do we have everything we need to close this one?
Yeah, I believe we do.
Okay. Paul, would you like to close?
Yes, please.
Also move, Madam Chairman.
Okay, motion by Beal. Is there a second?
Second.
I think that was Seth who got that one. By roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, thank you. We'll see you in a bit.
Okay, so moving into amended order of conditions. The first one is Nantucket Public Schools, Bacchus Lane. I think we have Diane O'Neill and John Making maybe presenting, and I am going to recuse myself for this one and hand it over to Ian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you to the commission on the behalf of the Nantucket Public Schools for the opportunity to present these proposed plans for an amended order of conditions for the Bacchus Lane Site Improvements Project. My name is John McMeeking. I'm a landscape architect with SMRT Architects and Engineers up in Andover, Mass. And I'm joined by Diane O'Neill, the Director of Facilities at the Nantucket Public Schools. So I think it's probably best idea to kind of give a quick refresher on this project, a little bit of background. But in 2018, the Conservation Commission approved plans for development to the then recently acquired land bank parcels, which became ownership of the town and the Nantucket Public Schools. This approved order of conditions included construction of a playground for the intermediate school students, a basketball court, natural grass varsity baseball field, a 50-space parking lot, bus drop-off, and a modular block retaining wall. A waiver was approved by the commission for a portion of the block retaining wall to be built within the 50-foot wetland buffer. As such, the wall setback was approved at 38 feet. This is essentially was the entire project at the time, phase 1 and phase 2. As things go, phase 1 has been implemented, but the school has always known and intended that the construction of this project would be broken up into phases. That being said, to date, the site's been cleared and stabilized. The playground and basketball court have been constructed, and the block wall, which will become right field of the varsity baseball field, has been installed. Some perimeter security fencing has been installed, as well as some evergreen plantings, some thuja along the western property line adjacent to the neighbors. So the plan you can see up right now was the originally approved plan. You can see the playground and basketball court up front by Bacchus Lane, the varsity baseball field kind of centrally located, and then the 50-space parking lot and bus drop-off. We did, you can see in the site plan, again, there was about a 10 to 15 space parking lot up close by Bacchus Lane as well. So that's essentially was the phase 1, phase 2 project that was approved by the commission and the HDC. Phase 1 has been completed, like I said, and we're now sort of in this transition period between phase 1 and 2. So while we're in this essentially a transition period, the public schools developed a campus planning committee with numerous tasks, but one of the first tasks of the campus planning committee was to take sort of a large scale look at the campus, the entire campus, with sort of a focus on athletics. What was working, what's not working, what does the future hold for athletics and student athletes on Nantucket? One of the things that was identified almost immediately was the need for tennis courts on campus, specifically on campus. Talking with the athletic director, tennis coaches, it was determined that 5 courts would be the minimum needed to provide proper programming and scheduling. So that's why we are proposing 5 tennis courts. The planning committee studied various locations on campus. And this location, after many sketches and many studies, was identified as the most favorable because not only did the courts fit, but it also allows other areas of campus to open up for potential future athletic improvements as they may happen down the road. So that's where we are today. On behalf of the Nantucket Public Schools, so we're requesting an amended order of conditions to essentially substitute the 5 tennis courts in place of the parking and the drop-off. No change to the baseball field. We essentially just want to remove the parking and drop off, and we want to put tennis courts in its place. The tennis court program, like I mentioned, will include 5 tennis courts, standard 10-foot high black chain link fence with gates. These courts are proposed to be constructed out of post-tension concrete. This material is proven to have a much longer serviceable lifespan compared with your traditional asphalt tennis courts. The asphalt courts are, they're built essentially like a road, and then an acrylic coating paved right on top. The post-tension concrete is a much more durable, stronger product. It doesn't crack, and we've been seeing lifespans of post-tension concrete courts somewhere 20, even 30 years without any cracking. There will be acrylic coat covering, just like a traditional tennis court, with a little bit of a cushion. You'll see on the site plan that both batteries, we split these courts up into a battery of 3 and a battery of 2 for 2 reasons. The first is orientation of the courts. It's critical for tennis courts to be oriented in a north-south direction. Otherwise, anyone playing tennis on one side of the court in the afternoon is not gonna be able to see very well on a sunny day. So north-south orientation on tennis courts is always ideal. And not only do we want to orient them north-south for that reason, but also because the pattern of the existing drainage on this site travels from north to south. A few other things on the tennis courts. The southern battery, which is those 2 tennis courts, will require a small modular block retaining wall, similar to the one that the commission approved for the baseball field. The wall will be held just outside the 50-foot buffer, but there's going to be some grading and some earthwork and stabilization and planting that's going to be necessary within the 50-foot buffer. So in addition to the amended order conditions, we are requesting waiver to construct or to do some grading within the 50-foot buffer as well. Included in your packet was a figure A, which showed some of the impacts pretty clearly about what those disturbances would be within the 50 and the 100. So you can see 225 square feet within the 50-foot buffer zone just to get this wall built, and then about 5,800 square feet of the modular block wall and just a slice of the tennis court. Stormwater. I think it's important to touch on stormwater. So we are removing the driveway, the parking lot, some sidewalks, and we're adding 5 tennis courts. So the stormwater management requirements have sort of changed here a little bit. Initially, we were treating the driveway and the parking lot with a series of catch basins and subsurface infiltration chambers underneath the asphalt parking lot. Now that we're removing the asphalt parking lot, these structures essentially become obsolete and they're not needed. We ran HydroCAD calculations and modeling of the proposed site plan that you're seeing now, and it basically told us that those structures were not necessary. So our plan is essentially the 15-space parking lot that you can see up against Bacchus Lane. We're now proposing to treat that stormwater with a vegetated filter strip in a bioretention area just adjacent to the parking lot. That should handle that. It's a very small little piece of asphalt, and the bioretention area and vegetated filter strip we feel will adequately treat and safely treat that stormwater, let it infiltrate. The tennis courts, the runoff from tennis courts is considered clean runoff. There's no automobiles driving on this pavement. There's no gasoline and oil debris or other deleterious materials that are dropped on tennis courts unless it's an act of vandalism or some strange thing. So tennis courts are typically in the industry, they're treated as clean runoff. Our intention is to, since these courts do pitch north to south, we will catch the stormwater in the battery of 3 with a crushed stone, essentially filter strip, which will infiltrate the water straight down into the sandy soils that this site occupies. The same situation will happen on the southern battery of 2 courts. In that corner where we have the modular block retaining wall, we plan to install a trench drain that will again pick up that stormwater and drain it out into the crushed stone filter strips. Any other infiltration that can happen on site, we do propose an infiltration basin just to the west of the battery of Quartz. So if you took a look at the grading plan, you can see that we're sort of pitching some of the water away from the Quartz and towards that infiltration basin. So the long story short, essentially, is we're adding a little bit more impervious area, 0.3 acres, essentially, but we're reducing the driveway and parking areas by half an acre. So we're taking away what I would consider stormwater that you have to treat and replacing it with stormwater that's essentially clean. We feel that this project, so far, you know, we're getting a lot of great reviews about the playground and about the basketball courts. People have seen the plans for the baseball field and the tennis courts, and the student athletes are very excited. This is a great project for the public schools. It'd be a fantastic new amenity to have on campus, so kids don't have to be bussed out to play tennis. And so on behalf of the Nantucket Public Schools, we are requesting an amended order of conditions and a subsequent waiver to build the block wall. If there's any questions, comments, I'd love to answer them as best I can. Diane is here joining me as well if you have any questions specifically rated or towards the public schools. So thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commission members, for listening, and look forward to your thoughts.
Ian, you're running this one.
Oh, food.
Because I'm a public school teacher, so I'm off this.
Mark?
I'm glad to get recognized. Will the courts be lit?
Great question. No site lighting for the tennis courts themselves. There will be security and safety lighting, Mark, but no big poles lighting up the neighborhood, no.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Joe?
Any mitigation plan for any of the square foot area you're taking within the 50-foot area?
We'd be open to planting wetland species down there that we may encounter, Joe. It's a lot of scrub at the moment because there's already been some clearing involved with the installation of the modular block wall for the baseball field. But certainly, I mean, it's 225 square feet of disturbance that we anticipate to build the wall, and I'm sure the public schools would have no problem replicating that with native vegetative species in that.
Yeah, I think that you're going to create quite a slope, and any vegetation to slow down some of that runoff would help.
Absolutely. Yeah, so, I would agree.
And something native would be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seth?
Thank you. I have one question for John, and I believe one for Diane. So to John, in terms of the stone infiltration areas outside of the tennis court, I was wondering if you'd consider using bioretention areas there instead, similar to what's proposed for the parking lot. I'd love to see a vegetative method rather than a stone. I think it's more effective.
And actually, the more I was thinking about this today, I think you are probably right. We get kids using these courts. The less stone that we have that they can pick up and throw, the better. So I think that Diane can attest to that. But yeah, I think that vegetative bioretention areas would probably be very beneficial in those areas as well. The only area I'm a little bit hesitant is the bank of two courts. When we're starting to pick that grade up, I just want to make sure that we have something to stabilize so we're not getting, real erosion coming off down there. So as long as the site's stabilized properly, and we shouldn't have any problem with that. Yeah.
Thank you. And then I'm sure the school and the planning committee has thought about this, but if you're going to be installing the tennis courts and removing the proposed parking area, How will that parking be allowed for? Is there going to be an alternative location? I mean, I played baseball when I was a kid, and to me, 15 parking spots for a baseball game, a basketball game, tennis matches, and a playground all at the same time is not nearly enough. So I know the school has other parking on its campus, but is there a plan to, put that in place for these facilities?
So there's a very large parking lot directly across the street that serves the elementary school and the intermediate school for parent drop off and pickup. And we recently removed some arborvitae that sort of hid that parking lot. So when kids were going there in the afternoon to practice for lacrosse and soccer, they weren't using the parking lot. And we figured out that it was more about sight. They couldn't. So we used actually some of the arborvitae. We have replanted them. Tom Hanlon has relocated them over to along this chain link fence in this area to help protect the neighbors a little bit. And we're just going to put up a rail fence. So with more sight lines to the parking lot, it's a very large parking lot. We feel that people will use that for this purpose.
Parking is always an issue. No matter the sport, parking is always the issue. And as Diane can attest, we've done a lot of studies on campus for trying to locate parking. Some very creative ideas, but yes, parking is definitely an issue. And I think, Seth, that as the campus planning committee continues its work, that's certainly going to be a hot topic.
So one of my questions was, are you planning to have bicycle racks?
That's a great idea. I think that's a wonderful idea. I think that they would definitely, locating them right kind of close up next to the basketball court, I think would be an ideal place for some bicycle racks. We'd have to secure them properly, probably pour a small little concrete slab and have that secured. But I think bicycle racks would be a great idea too. And we'll put a tennis court in a backpack, and you'll be all right.
Good. Well, I hope you'll be able to fit some in.
I hope so. It's a good idea. I'll put that in the list. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mark?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Joe?
To the chair, to Diane, have you ever talked to the Muse about during the daytime about parking there? Does that help mitigate some of that parking problems you could have?
No, we haven't really approached that. We've been working on this campus-wide master plan. And as I'm sure you all know, we're one campus and we're really trying to keep it that way. And that is why the town sort of gave us this land so that we could expand our athletics and John knows this because he's been on these committees, with the thought in mind that if we ever have to build another school, where will it go? And not have to disturb these athletic fields that we're putting all this money into now. So that is the reason that we've moved baseball. And it's the reason that we've chosen this site for tennis. So it doesn't get into an area that we may or may not have to use in the future for a future building.
Yeah.
So parking has been a huge discussion, trying to figure out where it's going, how much we can get in. And on this site specifically, it's been a big discussion. That's why we decided that the best move right now is just to move the arborvitae and see how that goes. We thought about moving the fence in on the Bacchus Lane fields and doing some parking there, but we really can't. There's a main irrigation line that runs along the fence line. It's just been one thing after another that we couldn't. Believe me, we've looked at several ideas, but we haven't approached them yet. But that might be a great idea. I will ask Mike Cosworth and Beth Hallett.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Jeff?
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest, based upon the comments, if it sounds like people are winding down, that I think just two suggestions to deal with Joe's comment earlier about the plantings at the base. You could simply add a condition that, plantings are to be required in that area of native and appropriate vegetation. And then thinking about the bioretention area or gravel, I think you could really do a comment, or not even a comment, but a condition that simply reads that all water infiltration areas are preferred to be bioretention, but gravel can be permissible for soil stabilization. I think you give them the flexibility to do either, and kind of put bioretention as the preference for the one, and kind of give them guidance that way, but that way they can still move forward.
Great. So anybody want to make a motion to approve these amended orders?
So moved.
Can someone make that motion to approve the amended order as conditioned? Because that way we can include those conditions.
So to approve the order as amended by Jeff Carlson.
Close enough, I guess.
We have a second?
I'm gonna get you on the hook.
A second, please. Oh, Maureen, you're seconding? Okay. So
before you go, Ian, we did have one comment. Sorry, we forgot public comment.
Right.
Burton Balkind asked if there will be water available at the site for sports participants.
Drinking water?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. All right, let her rip, Ian. That was it.
But no ice machine. Okay.
Not yet.
They're the Muse, and they're fine.
Okay, Maureen?
Yes?
A vote.
Oh, vote. I'm sorry. I didn't know we'd gotten to me. Okay, aye.
Well, I may be out of order here, but anyway.
Oh,
Seth,
okay.
Seth,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Golding, aye. And so moved. Thank you. I'm going to hand back to the chairwoman. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for your time. Really
Take care.
appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian, for covering me. Okay, so that moves us on to Nantucket Island Land Bank at 21 and 27 Easy Street, represented by Roger Miknowitz.
That's
Did I
correct.
touch with that?
Yes.
Okay, so you are up to present.
Thank you very much. My name is Roger McNevich. I'm an engineer with Coastal Engineering, and I'm representing the Nantucket Island Land Bank on this project. As you know, the project is under construction and is partially complete, and then was stopped because of the COVID-19 pandemic situation. And as you can see, there is the site has been dormant now for maybe 4 or 5 weeks. And just as a matter of information, both the land bank and the town is dying to get the project back up and running, and they're working with the town officials to see if they can accomplish that. Where this is a somewhat larger project that requires off-island contractors. But anyway, our purpose tonight of coming before the commission is for a couple of minor changes for the project. One is we want to introduce, for safety reasons, the land bank thought it'd be a good idea to introduce some ladders along the face of the bulkhead. The bulkhead's about 160 feet long. The mud line, the soils can be quite soft there. If someone gets stuck there on an incoming tide, the commission felt it might be a good idea, and we have shown the detailed side view and also location of 3 ladders along the bulkhead line spread out across the face. That's a minor item that we're proposing before the commission tonight. The primary purpose of our appearing is to do with the ongoing erosion problem that has occurred and continues to occur along the common property line with 29 Easy Street. As you recall from past storms and also one we recently had this winter, this site as well as Easy Street gets totally inundated by floodwaters. And then as the tide goes out, the tide water needs a place to drain. There is a catch basin system in the road, but that does not accommodate the kinds of flows that are needed to drain the water from the Easy Street neighborhood. So what happens, part of that water tends to drain out at along the common property line between 29 Easy Street and the land bank side. The issue here is that the old timber bulkhead that fronts along the harbor on 29 Easy Street is in a somewhat dilapidated condition whereby there's holes and openings in the bulkhead, and a great portion of the fill behind the bulkhead is actually washed out into the harbor already over the years and continues to wash out. And there's an ongoing erosion issue that has been addressed by our design. If you recall, this project includes a 70-foot long steel bulkhead that is completely is designed to be completely buried along that line. That bulkhead has recently been installed. It's about 3 feet off and parallel to the common property line with 29 Easy Street. The purpose of the bulkhead, we're hoping, will be totally redundant because depending upon the timetable of the owners of 29 Easy Street to repair their bulkhead, this bulkhead is really not a bulkhead. It's like a retaining wall, temporary retaining wall. It will no longer be needed if the timber bulkhead along the 29 Easy Street gets reconstructed, and that area is refilled to its original height. However, because we have this particular situation with the erosion, and because in talking with contractors, it was not feasible to place our steel sheet pile bulkhead right along the property line. The land bank very much wanted to have that steel sheet pile bulkhead right along the property line, but due to physical setback criteria for the construction equipment to install the bulkhead and a tieback system and the location of the residents along that property line, we were able to get the bulkhead only as close as 3 feet to the property line. So that left this intermediate zone of about 2.5, 3 feet of still area that was subject to erosion. That property line had a kind of, I guess, minor or jury rig kind of retaining system whereby the existing picket fence that's along that entire property line is also outfitted with 2 levels of 2x12 batter boards to provide some sort of bulkheading effect on a very shallow depth from the ground surface. What we're proposing here is to, in the event that we have another one of those floods situations, which we can almost count on happening, we're trying to introduce a zone where putting in a new fence that'll have much deeper footing. If you look on the detail of the plan, not only are we going to have a timber post fence, we're also planning on driving steel pipes about 8 feet below grade and then bolting the timber fence post to the steel post to get a better a securing of the fence and the new batter boards we're proposing, so that we can not only contain soil, but in the upper levels of that fill area, we're proposing to put in a layer of heavier size stone, riprap in that zone, so that when the flooding does occur and the water does try to exit the site, that it won't be soil washing away. The riprap will help stay in place and being secured by the batter board. We realize that this is it's not a permanent situation. It's the best attempt to try and alleviate and minimize the amount of erosion that's occurring in this flood situation along that property line. I can answer any questions you may have. It may be a little confusing, but that's kind of the intent. The The cross section of that design is in about the middle of the plan. If you can raise the plan up a little bit more, so you can see the detail that shows, it's kind of in the middle of the plan. Then you kind of see a cross section with an angled helical anchor pile, and you can see the buried bulkhead, and then you can see a zone of a little bit of riprap, and then you can see our proposed fence, which is being proposed to be located completely on the land bank property, whereas the existing fence is right on the property line, which is 6 inches to the left of the proposed fence. The proposed fence is proposed to be of the same design and appearance as presently exists, but have a substantially better support system, anchoring system. This area is going to have to be monitored, of course, but it's the best we can do under the circumstance. Both the land bank and we at Coastal Engineering were fortunate to have several conversations with Matt and Nick Judson, sons of the owners of the property today, and to review this, to explain this to them, and to touch base with them. And they told us they realized they need to do something on their property, and I presume that you will be hearing some sort of proposal from them, because their situation is only going in one direction, and so they realize they're going to have to do something in the near future. And hopefully, if they can proceed through that, through permitting and do that work, then this whole situation just disappears. It goes away. We don't have that situation anymore. But our project can't. We have to think we have to do something at this stage. So that's pretty much in a nutshell what we're proposing under this request for an amendment.
Thank you. Are there any questions from commissioners? Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering what the justification for having 3 ladders is. I understand the safety perspective of people needing to potentially get off the tidelands if they're trapped, but I'd like to see as little additional structure in that area as possible. So I'm wondering if it can be done with one stairs or one ladder.
Okay, Roger, can you answer that?
Sure. As you know, this site abuts the town bulkhead as well, where there is no ladder. And so we just thought it'd be a good idea to have some ladder. Even if you put in 2 ladders, I don't think the land bank is concerned about the number. They're just trying to propose a couple of ladders along that entire length. Our length is about 150 feet, and the town portion is, I don't know what that is, maybe 60 feet or so. And walking along, which I've done, there's only a brief half-hour period at low tide most times that you can walk along that shoreline. So, and it's pretty soft material. You can get caught there pretty easily if, for whatever reason, somebody is in that area. So, but the land bank will go along with whatever the commission recommends. They were making this proposal to see what the reaction was from the commission. So.
Thank you. Ian?
So I would see that if someone had to jump in to help rescue somebody, that they probably wouldn't want to go any further than they had to. So it hadn't occurred to me, Seth, that, that 1 would be better than 3. I don't really think it makes much difference, and I applaud them for taking this precaution.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Maureen?
I just have one question for Roger on I just want to be clear, if the owners that the sons of the owner that you've just spoken to, it sounds like they're clear they're going to need to do something. Now, if they were going to do something, would you not have to do that extra bit that you were talking about at the beginning? If it could all be done at once, that bit at the property line would not be necessary. Is that right?
Yeah, yes. However, it's been our experience, and this is the business we're in, that for them to be able to make application, go through the permitting, I would say it would take them anywhere from a year to a year and a half to get all the permits that they would need to do any of that work. So there's a long timeline, and it might even be longer depending upon how because of what's happening now in the permitting situation, among other reasons for this project. So that's kind of the situation. We're trying to accommodate an existing situation for the next couple of years. Hopefully, they're going to have to do something, because eventually their issue is going to start impacting the dwelling itself on that property.
I mean, it's just too bad that excuse me, that what we weren't able, or everyone wasn't able to get together on this, so we wouldn't have to be spending
Correct.
that additional money, or the land bank wouldn't have to be spending that additional money. So anyway, thank you, Roger.
Thank you.
Seth?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not going to give my whole spiel about bulkheads again. I don't particularly love this project. I know we already did give authorization for the repair, and I know that the land bank, the applicant can't constrain or control the private homeowners who abut the site. But yeah, just want to go on record saying that I believe in the same principles for this site, and if the neighbors come to the table with the application, I believe in the same principles for that site too that I've been expressing before. So, I just don't want to seem contrary in here.
Thank you, Seth. Any other thoughts or comments from commissioners? Jeff, do we have any public comment on this one?
I have not seen any, Madam Chair.
The public is quiet today.
So far.
Well, if there's no public comment and no other comments or questions from commissioners, is there a motion to amend the order?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham. Oh, you're muted.
Aye.
We can just do this.
So that carries unanimously. Thank you, Roger.
Well, thank you very much.
So that brings us further down in the public meeting to minor modifications. We have Holbert Ack LLC at 2 Holbert Avenue, and this is represented by Paul Santos.
Thank you. Paul Santos, Nantucket Surveyors, on behalf of Hulbert Ack LLC. This, due to a pandemic, my landscape knowledge has become, I think, the longest minor mod in commission history. So I'll be very quick. We're proposing to plant white oak trees along the property line and provide a minor modification to an existing notice of intent that was issued for 2 Hulbert Avenue.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Seth.
All right. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Awesome. So
Move to approve the minor modification.
is there a second? Seconded by Seth. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right. So that carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. We're excited for the native trees.
I am too.
All right, so moving on into certificates of compliance, we have Seaver at 51 Ocean Avenue, and this is represented by Paul Santos.
So I'll actually take that for Paul. I know he just kind of hopped off there. So this was originally for the demolition and removal of an existing structure. And then 2 new structures with some grading, landscaping, and utilities within the buffer zone to the coastal bank there. That's located across the street from Ocean Ave. I've actually gone by this site, I think 100 times in the last week on landscaping patrol duty, but we found the site to be in compliance and we don't have any ongoing conditions that we're recommending.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions from commissioners? So then is there a motion to issue the cert?
Motion to issue.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mark. All right, by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. So moving on to Sankety Builders LLC at 73 Baxter Road.
Sure. So this project as well, this is up in the section of Sconset Bluff that's kind of actively eroding. So it was for the relocation of the structures. You can see they've moved them kind of up and adjacent to that lot line to retreat from the bank. We found that project to be done in compliance as well. But as that was a structure that was relocated, there is a condition that we're recommending to be ongoing that essentially prohibits a coastal engineering structure to be permitted on the eroding bank, in the future to protect the project allowed by this permit, except those coastal engineering structures allowed by a waiver issued pursuant to section 1.03. So it's essentially the requirement that we're supposed to put on for structures that are no longer eligible for coastal engineering structure.
All right, thank you, Jeff. I think somebody has like a TV on or something that maybe needs to be muted. Are there any questions from commissioners?
We're being Zoom bombed.
Yeah, that's much worse.
That'd be the tamest Zoom bombing ever.
Yeah. So no questions from commissioners. So is there a motion?
So
move.
Is there a second?
this is like Jeopardy, you've got to hit the buzzer.
At least it's not the Hollywood Squares.
So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Harrisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
Right, so that carries unanimously. And that brings us on to orders of conditions. And I'm gonna have to see what we actually have here. So we have first Nantucket Memorial Airport at 14 Airport Road. Everybody should have received an email with the orders. And this one is SE 48 3294.
Yes. So if it helps, this was for the project that we closed last week for the replacement of the security fencing around the airport. From my notes, the only conditions that we wanted were related to removing the fence if possible, and then also adding a portion that as those posts that may not be able to be removed at this point be exposed to erosion or dew migration, that they're removed at that point. But other than that, I didn't have anything in my notes for other further conditions.
Thank you, Jeff. Mark, I think, has a comment.
I have a question. It says in the order of waiver that it has no adverse effect on the resource area. Is that accurate?
Typically, we've permitted kind of replacements in kind. in that way, because the other choice for the waiver here we'd be looking at would be a net benefit to the resource area. And I don't think that we would qualify underneath that. We unfortunately don't have a waiver provision related directly to something like public safety. So I think we felt that this was the best fit.
Okay, I'm good.
All right, Seth, did you have a question?
It's just a tiny point, but in the waiver section, dependent is spelled wrong once, so just clear that up.
It's very possible. Oh yeah, there you go.
All right. Any other thoughts from commissioners? If not, is there a motion to approve as amended?
Motion to approve as amended?
Is there a second?
Aye.
Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelberg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Oh, aye, sorry.
sorry, Topham.
Aye.
All right, that passes unanimously. And then we don't have Chakra. What ones do we have in our pack?
The next one, Madam Chair, would be 88 Quinnet Road.
Okay, so
Oh, yeah.
88 Quidnet Road. So Timothy and Elizabeth Quinlisk. And here it is on the screen for us.
Yes, so this is one of the ones that we closed tonight. This was the dwelling that we had continued from last time, so they could relocate the structure solely outside of 50 feet with that little like 2-foot shift. I'll be honest, I didn't really have a lot of conditions for it, so there are none.
Should we add the well or should we wait until we know it's going to come back no matter what?
The well is located outside of jurisdiction and is being relocated to somewhere outside of jurisdiction. So if
Yeah.
that changes, they would have to amend their permit.
So they have to come back in once they get approval from the Board of Health.
Correct. If it's going to be in an area in jurisdiction.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure.
Good question.
Actually, I do have something to say about this. I don't consider it a renovation. I consider it a new construction. And can you hear me? Because I've lost the screen somehow.
It's probably behind another tab. Yes, we could hear you.
Okay. Damn it.
Darn it, we're live.
Oh, garnet. And so I don't know what I've done wrong. But so it to me, it's absolutely clear that it's new construction. Okay, I'm done here. I don't know what I've done. Ah, Eureka, thank goodness. So yeah, I'd like that to be noted.
So you would like the order to be amended to say that?
Yes.
So you'd like in the permit overview to read this order permits.
The new construction.
Could you put, because they specifically said stuff about relocation, instead of renovation, would you prefer it to say reconstruction?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Easy change.
Thank you, Jeff.
No problem.
Any other thoughts or comments from commissioners? If there's not, is there a motion to approve as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All are by roll vote. Beal,
Aye.
Engelberg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And that moves us to 11 Meadow Lane LLC at 11 Meadow Lane, and that is SE 483299.
So on this one, this was the project that Paul Santos presented, where there was the second dwelling and pool, hardscaping and retaining wall inside the 100 that didn't require any waivers. So I included our kind of standard set of pool conditions. Didn't have anything else to add.
Thank you, Jeff. It looks like Mark has a comment.
Jeff, in section 21, is there a missing word? Doesn't read right.
Oh, you know what it is? It should say, oh, yeah, I'm just missing which word is missing. I think you could say the pool's drainage or discharges shall be to an area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. I probably meant to type it and then it was in my head and didn't make it to the paper. That happens a lot.
Well, I actually read these things.
All right. This is a question, I think, for Seth. Seth, is this the project that you were concerned about the plantings within the 50?
Yeah, it is. It seems like from the applicant's representative that there's not going to be landscaping in that area, but I don't think it hurts to put the condition into place that we need native no cultivars anyways.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That is probably good to put the condition in. Better safe than sorry.
I agree.
Well, we'll add a 23 then, that all plantings within commission's jurisdiction shall be native with no cultivars.
Yes. Awesome. If there are no other thoughts from commissioners, is there a motion to approve as amended?
Also move.
Is there a second? Seconded by Joe. So by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. That moves us into other business, approval of minutes.
Can I interrupt really quickly, Madam Chair?
Yep.
So we did close tonight. I didn't draft an order for it, but I just want to make sure I understand it correctly. For 4 Holbert Ave, you guys would like a positive order for that one, correct? We didn't really have any questions or comments.
Right.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I just wanted to double check that wasn't. Anyone have any thoughts for anything specific on that? For conditions that they would be looking for? If you think of any, you can email them to me. So.
Yeah, I think the standard like lighting conditions as they're raising it up.
Perfect. All right, cool.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, guys.
So moving on to other business, approval of minutes for April 16th. Ian?
Terry does have a correction that she wants to make to the minutes. Trying to provoke her into, she said, please approve the minutes as amended. I had to add, quote, public to the SBPF discussion. So she had to make a technical amendment there, but so she's asking for it to be approved as amended.
So actually, there are a couple of things that need to be changed, I believe. And where I'm quoted on the first page of repairing rights, I said riparian rights, RIPARIAN. So if the minutes could reflect that. And then on page 693, it's typed as granting the waive, and I actually I said granting the waiver. So it needs an R added. So
granting the waive would be pretty cool.
That's what I thought.
Thank you, Ian. Any other thoughts on the minutes from anybody? So I guess, is there a motion to approve the minutes with amendments?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
By roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Erickson, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, Terry, for the minutes. And this brings us on to discussion of SBPF 87 through 105 Baxter Road, template maintenance. And this is represented by Dwight Dunk and Stephen Cohen.
Real
Jeff?
quickly, Madam Chair, before not to interrupt Stephen, I apologize. Are you going to be taking public comment on this?
I think we should take public comment on this, yes.
All right, I'll just let them know through the YouTube chat that they can start entering it then. I just wanted to check first. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Steve or Dwight, do you want to start?
Sure, I can. I'll start.
Okay.
There's just from the carryover from 2 weeks ago was the to go out and do the maintenance. The maintenance was done. We asked to bring out the pulpus sand. There was a question, a concern about some material still remaining on the template and not wanting that to get buried by the pulpus sand. With the recent storms, we sent a letter yesterday over to Jeff. So I'm just going to backtrack quickly. With the recent storms, has become exposed tubes again. So we would requesting to do additional maintenance to recover those exposed tubes, and that would actually allow any more observation of material. But during the last maintenance activities, there was material collected the first day. After that, there was very little collected, and there hasn't been really anything collected since that maintenance was completed. So what we're requesting in terms of maintenance would be to recover the exposed tubes. That gets, takes care of that aspect. It gives another pass to make sure that there's another look to make sure that there's nothing there before, and then we request that the pulpus sand be authorized to be delivered. Another activity that we have requested in the past that we included in the letter last week. I'm getting feedback. I don't know if anyone else is, but what we're we've requested authorization to remove the brick and the material that's coming out of the bluff at 85 Baxter Road. There's material on the bluff, hanging out of the bluff. It's come out in the past, so it's accumulated near the base. And sometimes that material, we think, also gets mixed in with the lower sand ramp because the bulldozers work, right up to that area. So we'd like permission to also remove that material as part of this maintenance work and do that again before the pulpus sand gets delivered. So those are the main issues relative to the maintenance, the Baxter Road removal, and approval to deliver the pulpus sand. So those are the primary things that we wanted to discuss in terms of the maintenance. Two other items that were on the letter from last week was, I know at the hearing, at the meeting 2 weeks ago, the discussion about a protocol for reusing terrestrial sand. We had provided a draft to the commission back in December for consideration. So we just resubmitted that to Jeff and to the commission. And just for your, as that gets developed. And the other item that we identified last week in last week's letter was the extension of the Koya return extensions, installation of those to the north and south. Those were approved in an amended order of conditions over a year ago. Things changed and shifted so that they weren't able to be installed without actually having to excavate a lot of sand. What we wanted to do was, where the enforcement order was, no further work. We don't have that work lined up right now, but we just wanted to get that onto the radar screen for the commission. It's been approved. The pre-construction notification is to notify Jeff, prior to the start of work. We would follow all of those procedures. But again, that is not being scheduled at this time. The conditions at the north and south end really aren't amenable for installing those right now. But we just wanted to, remind the commission that that's an item that's out there to be done once the bluff is in a condition to allow it to be installed without having to remove a lot of material. So those are basically the 4 or 5 items that we had in terms of maintenance to discuss with the commission.
Thank you. Steve, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Not at this time.
Any questions or comments from, Jeff, is that, yep, your hand?
Sorry, I just wanted to throw in today, just as a little bit of an update, is I was able to go out today and walk both the top and bottom section of the template. So just to kind of go the route, it's the same route I always use, is kind of started where the goat path goes down the bank, walk down the northerly return, walk the entire face of the structure on the beach side, come up the other end ramp, and then kind of walk back the top again. And in walking today, I personally picked up a couple pieces of small, look like washed in debris, things that hadn't come from the sand, but wasn't able to really see or recover any significant debris or something I would consider to be construction debris for the entire length of both the top and bottom of the template. The one spot on the very southern end, where the delivery ramp and the sand delivery area kind of intersects, there's definitely some significant debris still coming down the bank there. There are a couple of like the sonotube with the big plastic conical footings that are coming down the bank, and one is getting close to that area and looks like it should be able to be retrieved soon. But for the most part, the template to the north from there, I was not able to recover any real significant debris. The only other thing I picked up was a red piece of plastic that said buried utilities. And that was really it. So I was pretty pleased to see that there weren't significant pieces of bricks or asphalt or concrete, or anything that I saw on the initial inspection with all that debris.
Thank you, Jeff. Dwight? Nope.
Just want to note that those conical footing sonotubes are coming out of 85 Baxter Road, because there were some that were still observed, at least when I was out there in the fall, that were hanging out of the bluff. So those are coming from 85.
They've been slowly making their way down from the top.
Exactly. And that's the type of stuff we would like to, along with the brick and everything else, get off of the 85 lot.
Awesome. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question regarding the proposed sands screening procedure, or the sand analysis procedure. I think that I know it's still a draft. I think there are some things missing from that protocol, given the history that's happened since it's been submitted. And one thing I think would be prudent to do would be, beyond the sieve analysis, to also have the contractor who's retrieving that material do some type of process to check through for construction debris, whether that's putting it through a screen or picking through it in the box or whatever it is, but just an additional level of making sure there's not debris in it before it gets delivered to the template, so we don't have this problem again.
Thank you, Seth. Ian?
Yes, if we're talking about protocols going forwards, I look at that as being a very rough draft. And I remember we asked Jeff at the last meeting if he could put some protocols together, and perhaps going forward, you'll be able to, Jeff. I'd happy to send you some of the stuff from Florida State that I discussed, like Munsell coloring, because I think color is very important going forward, as well as a silt analysis. So, because I absolutely don't want to see us ever in the position that we were, and I'm sure SBPF would agree, going forward as we were last fall and last winter. So I very much look at this as being a rough draft.
Thank you, Ian. Jeff?
Yeah, so to answer that, we've been working on those. I apologize for not getting those done, and also not getting some final resolution on the ticketing letter with town council as well. We all got mired into the back to work protocols for construction and landscaping over the last kind of week and a half, and are still playing catch up on some of those things. So we'll have those for sure for the next meeting. So I do apologize for that delay.
Please, no apology, Jeff. I didn't mean it as a criticism at all. So I hope you didn't take it that way.
Oh, no, definitely. I just wanted people to be clear. It wasn't that we weren't working on it. It's just they, in the grand scheme of work assigned to us, that emergency order through the town kind of took priority for most of at least my time in the last 2 weeks. So we'll get there. I promise.
Thank you. Seth?
Thank you. I know in the letter that SPPF provided, there was like 4 or 5 different things they discussed. So I'll defer to the chair on how we want to handle this. If we want to stay focused on a protocol or we want to jump back and forth, but I have a comment related to the 85 Baxter Road material collection. Should I do that now or wait?
Yeah, no, I think you can do that now.
Okay, so I appreciate the SPPF willing to take on the responsibility of cleaning that site up. I think it's great. I would just request that the material that's coming out of that be cataloged and recorded similar to a way that's been happening with the current cleanup on the template, so we can have an estimate moving forward of what's coming from the template versus what's maybe coming from the 85 site. So I know there's been some justifications in the process that in the past that potentially a lot of the debris is from that one site, and cataloging it will allow us to know if that's true or not.
Thank you, Seth. I think that's a good point. Any other thoughts or comments from commissioners? Maureen?
I should turn another lamp on, I guess. It's getting a little dark in here. No, I have something that's for SPPF, but it's separate from this. I just wanted to mention that it's about their viewing station. So it's a totally separate topic.
But okay. Do you want to just ask the question now since you've kind of started?
Oh, okay. I was up by the viewing area yesterday, and the the kind of the past the little parking area when you then walk in, there's just a little at the very edge of the cliff, which, as you know, drops very straight down. There's just a rope and a couple stanchions. So it struck me as if people are getting out and about and someone had their little kid who runs in front of them, be very easy for anyone to fall off. So it looks like just a safety hazard, so that I would suggest you have a barrier there that would prevent dogs and children from leaping off.
Come on, Maureen. They'll only do it once.
Yeah, I watched Bam rappel down that bluff face, so it can be done.
Really?
Oh my God.
It's
okay, I'm sure they will note that and look at the safety there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sure.
So if there's no other kind of general thoughts or comments, I guess we can go through the topics here. The template maintenance and inspections. So they want us to approve the delivery of Pulpus Harbor sand. Any, Jeff?
Sorry, I just want to make sure I get the sequence correct. I'm trying to keep track. I understood it originally as doing some maintenance with the material that's there, doing an additional screening to make sure that there's no construction debris, then doing some cleanup as part of that from 85 Baxter Road, and those two things being completed before Pulpist Harbor Sand is delivered. Want to make sure, because I think the sequence is important, and I think with that too, I think we would offer that in between those steps to go out and make sure that we're doing physical inspections of the site in between any of those activities that are authorized to be sure that that site is in compliance before part 2 kind of continues and then into part 3.
Thank you, Jeff, because I was just reading from Dwight's letter that I think was dated yesterday, and that's where they start, because I agree we shouldn't dump the sand until the template's clean. Steve?
Yeah, I agree with that, and I don't have any objections to this being done in order, except that delivering Pulpist Harbor Sand to the opposite and the north end as opposed to the south end might be okay, but certainly we wouldn't want to be covering over the debris at 85 with new sand before it was cleaned up. But I think that's the intent, right? To make sure that, that the cleanup is done, but I wouldn't want to see a prohibition on delivering at the opposite end where there would be no interference, just in case, just because we're running tight on time in terms of, being able to deliver for the season. But certainly we wouldn't want to deliver at or near 85 until that portion was debris free.
So
I think, aren't they?
Jeff, question for you. I thought they only had one approved delivery area. Do they have a second approved delivery area?
Yeah, the only spots that we've used before is the vacant lot in the area there of kind of 85 and the lot that's kind of grown over and grassed over. From the initial construction, that's where they had the conveyor system set up before. That kind of, I hate to use the word sluiced, but it's the only word I can think of right now at 8 o'clock, is sluiced onto the beach.
Okay. Yeah, because sorry, Ian, what are you trying to say?
That where they were sluicing it onto the beach was 99 Baxter originally. And my understanding, I would say these are different, they're separate issues. So Madam Chair, if I may say so, I would prefer to see it done the way that Jeff laid out the protocol.
Yeah, actually, I'm sorry, I got a correction that we could do it in that order. We don't need the concurrent.
Okay. So Jeff, can you go over the order again, just because I'm losing it here at 8:12?
I hear you. So I tried to memorize it today so I would be on top of it for this. But so the order that I understand it to be is the machine will go out first and scrape the top like they have been doing. And then any debris that uncovers in that process of recovering the tubes from that will be collected and properly disposed of. The second step is the debris cleanup down at 85 Baxter Road, which is adjacent to the sand delivery area and it overlaps with the southern end of the ramp, and removing all of the rest of the debris that's come down the bank or is in jeopardy of getting onto the template or into the sand delivery area. That's number 2. And then after those 2 are completed, the Pulpist Harbor Sand can then be delivered and distributed across the template correctly.
Thank you, Jeff.
No problem. And I think, and real quick, sorry, I apologize for interrupting. And in between each one of those steps, I think it would be our intent, at least as staff, would be to go out and physically inspect in between each one of those. So if we get notice that they're doing that work that day and they're going to finish up, I will make sure that we get out there same day to go and verify that that work has been completed and we're not seeing any issues or have any issues of concern.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. So do we need a motion to approve that sequence?
Yes.
So is there a motion to approve that sequencing?
Motion to approve that sequencing.
Is there a second?
Second.
Looks like seconded by Maureen. So by roll vote, Beal,
Beal votes aye.
Engelborg,
Sorry, I was muted. Can I just make one comment before we move forward with the vote? Just in the 85 Baxter Road, that we're getting the catalog of materials in.
Yeah, we'll do that.
yeah,
Okay, if so, then aye.
okay. Arisman, aye. Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right, that carries unanimously. And I think as far as the protocols for sand sourcing, it sounds like we're gonna have staff work on that in conjunction with what you've submitted and bring that back for a future discussion.
Yep, we'll have that ready for review for the 5/14 meeting for sure.
Okay.
I think Stephen has a question, Madam Chair.
Steve,
Sure. So I just want to be clear if there are any restrictions remaining from the enforcement order aside from following the protocols that were just voted on and then not delivering other sand besides the pulpus sand. I think that's it. So if there's anything that's not included, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
so Jeff does this. Do we need to vote to effectively lift the cease and desist?
You certainly can. I would say you might want to put it that, obviously the Pulpus Harbor sand is really the approved sand source at the moment. That any other sand source obviously will have to be reviewed, but I think as far as working, I think at a staff level, we don't mind that getting lifted for the scope of work that we just adopted for sure.
Okay. Dwight,
And just to be clear, just thinking about ongoing post-storm maintenance, moving forward, could it go back to the protocol process that Jamie notified Jeff after a storm that they're going to get out there and recover exposed tubes? For the last two storms, we've come to the commission specifically because of the EO condition, and just want to know if going forward, post-storm maintenance can follow its kind of normal process that's covered under the order.
I guess my feeling is that until we've okayed for the Pulpus Harbor sand to be delivered, and like that all the debris has been cleaned out, I would rather still see a little bit of oversight, but that's just me. I don't know how the rest of the commission feels about that. Ian?
Oversight.
Okay. Seth?
Yeah, I don't want to put undue hardships on the project, the SPPF, but I just think that until we have the sand sourcing procedure, the analysis of what's been cleaned out of 85 Baxter Road, the okay for the Pulpus sand to go on, we should just keep it limited still.
Dwight?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to note that recovering the exposed tubes doesn't require bringing on new sand. The purpose of the template is that it's the on-site stockpile, so that the material can just be pushed over to recover the exposed tubes. So having the Pulpus sand on there would be the source sand. After,
Okay.
Going forward for now.
Yes, when that's approved, because you have like 2 steps before that's approved to be dumped. So I don't want to get ahead of ourselves at this point, I guess. Joe?
Just to follow up and stay on SPPF, has the select board weighed back in on our letter?
So
Yeah,
we have,
Jeff.
we have sent it to them and have not gotten a response back as of yet. But I would imagine that, I know it's not on the agenda for tomorrow's meeting, but I would imagine that it would probably be on the, either the following meeting, or if not, the meeting after that. I know most of their agenda has been pretty clogged up with all of the COVID work that's been going on. So I know they've been pushing some agenda items out if they can, or something that's not directly related to an emergency order. But I actually just had a public comment about that. We'll definitely confirm that they have it and try to get a firm date for when they're going to be discussing it.
Thank you, Jeff. And since you mentioned public comment, has there been any other public comment about this matter?
We've had a couple questions about the daily logs that have been sent in. Most of those are available through either previous packs or are up, or some are probably being backlogged. The website load up has been pretty clogged up, and Florenci's been trying to keep up, but they have been sent in, and we do have those, so we're happy to send those independently if people would like those. And then there was the question about the commission's letter. And as you guys know, we just finished doing all the signatures from like last meeting just a few days ago, and then we finally sent those in. So we'll confirm that response and get to them. And then the last one is also from Deanne, is what are the consequences for the applicant for violating a cease and desist order? And as we said earlier, that's something that we've been taking up under the letter that we've been working on to issue that punitive action, and that was also included in the letter to the select board as well. So that's kind of where all of those sit.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Joe?
And all that information, Jeff, has gone up to the DEP as well, correct?
Correct. Anything that we do as far as enforcements or letters for this project all get sent to DEP.
Yeah, I just want to make sure people watching are understanding that.
Yeah, so I'll say too, though, is I'm not surprised we haven't been getting a lot of responses from DEP. They're in a very similar situation where most of them are working remotely and their return times are very slow. I mean, we've been asking for about a week now about guidance on other nourishment projects as it relates to the governor's orders for stay at home and what's essential and what's allowable, and haven't gotten a response back from the folks that we talked to about that yet. So like everywhere, everything is just moving a little bit slower than normal. So I wish it was normal speed, but it's not.
Thank you, Jeff. Steve?
Sure. I don't mean to ask somewhat the same question, but I feel like we're in a little bit of a dangerous situation where the contractor could be inadvertently getting in trouble. And I want to get some clarity so we don't have that. If I understand the vote you just took, it was to allow for essentially the cleanup of the existing template and the sifting of that sand and the use of that sand, the existing template sand to cover the tubes. And then secondly, for the cleanup and logging of any debris over at 85 Baxter Road in that area. And then thirdly, for the use of the delivery of the Pulpus harbor sand in that area, with each step being confirmed by staff before moving to the next step. So if that's the case, which is fine, and then we wouldn't deliver any new sand until the protocols would be voted on separately, which is also fine. I don't know why we wouldn't be allowed to do regular post-storm and other kind of maintenance. I think requiring us to come back for every little thing is perhaps not the best use of the commission's time, and potentially leaves the tubes exposed for unnecessary periods of time that, essentially a lot of that stuff can be done through the staff level. It's not bringing in new sand. It's not, creating a situation that wasn't already in place for the past 7 years. I think that ordinary maintenance is something we need to make sure is something that can be done using either the pulpus sand that's being delivered or the existing sand after the 3 steps we talked about are done. And I'm not sure why that couldn't happen.
well, it can't happen if we're voting on it not to happen. You know, unfortunately, there's been a real lack of responsibility on your end. And I think before we hear from our select board about how they feel about it, you guys are still going to be under some oversight, you know? And I mean, really, we're meeting every 2 weeks for you guys to machine, scrape, and pick up debris, then clean up the debris at 85 Baxter. I mean, I don't think that 2 weeks talking to Jeff is that big of a deal at this point in the year. I think if there was some major storm, we're all available. We've had emergency meetings about you guys before, that we could be called to have a meeting. But again, you know, my fellow commissioners, I know Ian said oversight, Seth said continue oversight. How should we have a vote on that as a commission to see who would like to continue the level of oversight we've been asking for? Jeff, is that something you would recommend?
Certainly, if you guys want to, you know, set that in place one way or the other, you guys certainly have the ability to do that. I think that would be fine.
Maureen?
Yeah, and I would just like to say that I appreciate Steve saying, you know, you guys not wanting to bother us, you know, every minute. But as Ashley said, we're here to be bothered, and I think I would agree that we should continue oversight and, you know, make that clear, so you guys know, you know, exactly what you need to do.
Joe?
Sure. And I would agree on the oversight.
I just want to clarify. I don't think that there shouldn't be oversight. I just am worried about delays in post-storm recovery and things like that if we keep this regime in place too long. Whereas, you know, some of these things have historically been well done through the staff process, and we would have, you know, clean screens saying there to work with it. But that's fine for now, until the commission feels comfortable. We'll stick with what the commission has ordered. I just, you know, thought it was really important to make sure that the contractor wasn't out there, you know, doing something without clarity, and then we're back in an enforcement order because there wasn't that clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any other thoughts or comments from commissioners on this? So Jeff, should we just continue? Maureen, did you just raise your hand? No, okay. Jeff, should we just continue this discussion on our next meeting as far as the sand sampling protocol and, you know, everything else that's in progress?
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate for sure.
Okay. Should we check public comment one more time before we?
No, we are current through the last one, other than we just got a thank you for your responses and for all the time the commission has spent on the project from Deanne Atherton and the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy.
Okay. So with that, then, if there's no other comments, we'll move on in our agenda. Thank you, Steve and Dwight, for giving us information.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So just so we're on the same page, we don't intend to come back or to submit anything else except to work through Jeff on the protocols and to update Jeff as actions are taken that were voted on tonight. Thank you.
Yes, unless you're like still getting daily debris removal, you should still be continuing with those sorts of logs and submissions to us.
Yeah, through Jeff, absolutely.
Yep, the daily inspections are continuing, and there's been nothing collected all week. So.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. So that moves us on to reports. I'm pretty confident we don't have any, but crack.
We haven't been meeting.
Okay.
Only regulatory boards are meeting.
Yeah. So
And
should I
that's
just?
pretty limited.
Yeah. So CPC did meet.
Okay. So CPC did
Okay.
meet.
Overachievers.
Yeah, so we had a Zoom meeting, which went very well, considering it was Ken Bovergrand's first time. So I actually told them to watch this meeting because I thought you did a great job, Ashley. And the way we communicate through Zoom and YouTube, I think it works really well, because one of our concerns is how we're going to do our annual meeting. That's kind of a big concern. And then the other part is we're a little concerned about getting money voted through town meeting and then getting distributed to these projects. So, you know, the projects can go forward, but they may not get the money. So it's kind of, you know, chicken before the egg kind of thing. But we're just waiting to, you know, inform everyone that we're not going to have money when you're going to want to start the project, or if we're going to have money based on economic times and COVID-19 and what will happen at town meetings. So we're kind of in a flux right now as far as the CPC and money being distributed and awarded. So that's it.
Thank you, Joe. NP and EDC? Oh, you're muted.
Okay, we also had a Zoom meeting a couple of days ago, and because we had to approve accepting the next bunch of state money through the TIP, the travel something program. And so we had that, we did that technical thing, and that was all.
Thank you, Maureen. No other. So that brings us on to commissioners' comments. Any commissioners' comments, Seth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just really quickly reiterating that I'd like to get the glyphosate discussion on the agenda. I sent out some documentation to Jeff and Joe. I don't know if it's been sent around or not, but at some point, if that could get on the agenda, it'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm having terrible flashbacks about the back and forth between Ian and Ernie, and I kind of know where some members stand, and I'm worried that if we get into a discussion and we can't all be on the same page as a commission, it's maybe not going to be as productive as we would like, but that is what it is. Joe, you had a comment? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. So someone gave me a text message saying that there's some issues at 7 Chase Link Circle.
Oh, I'll get to that, Joe. You just be patient.
All right. I'm muting myself.
Jeff, I have a comment or kind of a question, and it's not necessarily wetlands related, but if people are like reporting to me that landscapers are rounding up driveways in today's 30-mile-per-hour wind, is that something that goes to you? Because I didn't think that was a permitted practice right now.
Yeah, if anyone gets a comment on landscaping or concerns that someone's not following the protocols or staying within the scope of the emergency order, please just refer it to us and we'll check it out. So if you give us an address or a company, we're happy to follow up on anything that we get.
I have to say good luck to you, because I've seen like so many people packed in truck cabs, and it just is bad out
It's
there.
a little crazy, you know. I said that last night at the selectmen meeting. Our biggest problem with trucks and truck cabs, it's not the guys with names on vehicles as much, but the sheer number of commercially plated pickups and stake body trucks and dump trucks and mini dumps and that have multiple people that don't know if they're, and you don't see, you know, rakes or shovels or a mower. It's just the truck outside of following to them where all they're all going. That has by far been the most difficult part of enforcing the emergency orders, is dealing with the folks in vehicles. So yeah, anytime someone sees something, at least we're trying to keep a log of that too if we're getting complaints, because it's something where if it's a larger problem for enforcement, that if we have to view it differently or approach it a different way, having some data behind that's always helpful.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Any other commissioners' comments?
Well,
No.
I was biking in from Sconset yesterday. It was staggering how many panel trucks and trucks there were on the road. And here in town, the pickup has been, you know, the increase in traffic has been I don't know, multiply by 8 or 10 from, 10 days ago. So you have your work cut out for you, sir, and thank you.
Well, we're all, I mean, it's not just me. I mean, Joanne's putting in a lot of work and JC's putting work in out there for landscaping, and it's our whole team to try to get out there and do the best that we can with dealing with all of it. So Joanne's got the hardest job because she's in the office and she gets like 8 million phone calls a day now. So I don't know how she gets anything done.
Well, it's like the select board said, it was easy to drop the hammer, but it's difficult to pick the hammer back up. And then the moment they lifted it up, it seemed like everyone just started to run back out to work. So
there have been we've got a lot of questions, a lot of things going on. And I think one of the big pieces of confusion too is, at least I'm only going to speak to emergency order number 6 because the landscaping is the one I've been focused on, but how it relates to the governor's order. And we get a lot of questions on, can I do this activity? Can I do that activity? And then it's always, well, why can't I do that activity? And we simply say a lot of times, well, it doesn't fit within the governor's order where landscaping is deemed essential for the purposes of, safety and sanitation and things that relate to residences. And then kind of using what guidance we've gotten from them and a few other spots to how that works. Cause there's definitely some things that personally I think are a stretch and some that aren't, and some that probably should be included that weren't, and how that all kind of works together. But that's what we get. I mean, I can't tell you the number of questions I've gotten about things like, window boxes or driveway repair or all of these things. And, it's hard to lump those in sometimes to those categories, but we're trying to chip away at it. And I think we're all waiting to see where the governor goes in the next 2 weeks and what happens in the Commonwealth. And hopefully our COVID numbers start to go down and it makes decisions a little easier. But I'll knock on wood.
Thank you, Jeff. If there's no other commissioners' comments, I'll give it over to Jeff for administrator staff reports.
All right. I've been hanging with Joe long enough in suspense. So we got some reports of some cutting going on at 7 Chase Links Circle. For those who don't know where Chase Links Circle are, it's one of the properties. It's not directly adjacent to Tuppence, but it's adjacent to the adjacent property to Tuppence as you're headed towards the Nantucket Eel Point Cliff Road intersection. As you're going that way, it's on the, I guess it would be the eastern side of Tuppence, and it kind of goes back. It's the old part of the old Graves property, and then the house that used to be the Kosei house that had the like little geodetic dome back there that we've worked on a few times. It's that property right to the east. So we had a report of cutting. We pulled our files. We unfortunately don't have any files on 7 Chase Link Circle specifically, but it is a property that's pretty significantly held in a conservation restriction with the land council. And it looks to me like the conservation restriction and line of development probably is pretty close to the 100 or on the non-jurisdictional side of the 100 a little bit, which explains why we haven't seen a filing for it. But the restriction documents showed some wetlands in there. We did a site visit today with the director of the Land Council, Emily Molden, and definitely saw some cutting that was probably in violation of the conservation restriction. Not an expert on it. It's not one that we hold, so I don't really dig into it that much. And it also appeared that there was some work done in the buffer zone within 100 feet. Looks like some cherry trees probably got cut down. And some other things there. So I think we're hoping to have you guys ratify an enforcement order that we'd like to send out. We did send the work crew who was doing the work off the site. We spoke to the property owner in person on the site. They were very happy to listen and didn't have issues with sending the workers off to be there. We did a follow-up inspection later in the day and the workers were still not there, and we'll follow up again tomorrow to make sure that they are not there. But we're hoping if you guys issue that enforcement order, we can start them into the process and hopefully get a wetlands delineation done and see what work was done for sure in our area of jurisdiction, and work with the conservation restriction holder to get it fixed and prevent it in the future.
Thank you, Jeff.
Ian? through the chair, Jeff, can that be a $50 a day violation? Or do you?
It certainly could be. I think we'll wait for our secondary guidance from town council on how we evaluate that per day violation. I know our guidance in the past, if you cut the tree down, is that the violation or is it a violation until it gets fixed or replaced? Is always a little bit of the gray, and that's what we're trying to rectify with the other one that we've talked about earlier. But we can certainly issue a penalty. I think part of it, honestly, Ian, is also, I went down where I thought the wetland edge was. I didn't do any delineation work today. But I want to make sure that it's for sure in jurisdiction before we issue out that penalty. So it actually counts. So
Gotcha.
It'll take a little bit of work. I'm 99.99% sure that there was work done in jurisdiction, but would love
The
to.
landowner might well have been genuinely unaware that it was within jurisdiction.
I think that will all come
Good.
to light, but I think so. But I also think that they were well aware that they were subject to the restriction that's recorded. So there was some general level of awareness that that was an area that was subject to some level of protection. I think that's fair.
So Jeff, do you need the commission to make a motion to issue out the enforcement?
That would be fantastic.
Is there a motion? Is
So moved.
there a second? I think
Second.
I'm going to give that to Maureen because she had her hand up first. So by
Without the
roll,
microphone.
well, by the time we get used to all this, we'll be back in regular meeting space probably. So, but by roll vote, Beal? Nope, you're muted.
And aye.
Engelborg?
Aye.
Erisman, aye. Golding?
Aye.
Phillips?
Aye.
Topham?
Aye.
Okay, so that is unanimous to issue out the enforcement.
Excellent. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Well,
Yes.
well,
If
thanks,
Joe
Joe.
wants-
We got that reported from a couple different spots. And it was nice to see it get reported. So
So with that, I think it's time to adjourn this meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
It's not 9 o'clock.
Getting close. Is there a second?
You
Second.
stay right there, Maureen.
I know.
you
We
don't
have to
have to
go
get off the call, Maureen.
Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Erisman, aye. Golding,
Definitely aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Topham.
Aye.
All right,
Everyone do
this
well.
meeting is adjourned.
Great job, everybody. Thank you.
Great
All
job,
right.
Ashley.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, I know. I keep dragging it out.